online yet. I'll wait until,
Now we are.
we are now online. Okay. Transmitting, ground control to Major Tom. This town board of Estes Park, regular board meeting August 25th, 2026 is now in session. Anyone who'd like to stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance with us may do so. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, agenda approval. Are there any changes or additions to the agenda as written? Seeing none.
Mayor, the only question I have is whether the town board would like to continue the discussion about the downtown plan approach at the end of tonight's meeting as a report and discussion item, or at the end of the September 8th.
Town attorney, do we need a motion for that, or consensus, or what do we need?
I wouldn't say we necessarily need a motion unless it's unclear what the board would like to do by unanimous consent. If it's clear what everyone would like to do, I think that's fine.
All in favor of adding it to the end of today's agenda, raise your hand, please. It looks like it's not unanimous, but is that sufficient, town attorney?
The clerk's office might have words for me, but I think that's going to work, Mayor.
Okay. So it's added to the end of the agenda. The last topic that we were discussing, we did not have a chance to fully discuss it. And that is from the actual item is called Downtown Plan Approach and Funding Mechanisms, that was being presented by Town Administrator Mahalik. It is now added as a report or a discussion item at the end of today's agenda. With that being changed, I'll take a motion on that modified agenda.
I'll make a motion on the agenda with the addition of the report discussion as presented.
I will second that.
Trustee Eshelman moved to approve the modified agenda with the downtown plan approach added at the end, and Trustee Brown seconded. We can vote. The motion passes 6-1. We'll move on to public comment for items not on the agenda. And of course, if it's related to anything quasi-judicial, we can't take public comment on that. That has to wait for the appropriate public hearing. Does any member of the public request to speak on a non-agenda item? I have one down front here. You'll have 3 minutes, and please state your name and make sure I got my little thingy going here. Okay, there we go. That 6 seconds didn't count.
Thank you. My name is Sarah Barwinski, and I live at 704 Moreau Lane with this gentleman here, who I celebrated my 50th wedding anniversary last Friday. So thank you. On Saturday, we celebrated our anniversary with another entity that has been formed the same year as our marriage, 1976, and that's Habitat for Humanity International. And I wanted to share with you that we combined forces and raised $1,500 at that event that was really made up of community members. We had a Thrivent Action Team. I don't know if any of you recognize the t-shirt that says Live Generously, and they provided a small grant. They provided t-shirts for the team. And we also then had the opportunity to learn a little bit more about Habitat, because I think people need to know what's going on in terms of development. And so Habitat for Humanity of St. Vrain Valley wrote our group a letter with a little update that included a brochure and a map. And I had enough left over that I thought you might like them too. I know many of you are up to speed, but I also see the new board faces, and welcome, that this might be helpful information. The second thing I wanted to share just briefly is I've gotten to reflect a little bit about what Live Generously means, and it isn't just supporting through volunteer efforts. I think that everything you do all the time as town representatives, as putting yourself out there in terms of the arena, is living generously as well. And sometimes I'm not sure you get thanks enough. I know that you kind of have to take some hits from different directions at different times. I believe in relentless civility as well as others do. I also think it's important for the follow-up article that was written by our mayor that stands be taken, but taken with civility. And so I am going to adopt relentless gratitude, and I have been remiss at not saying that a lot sooner, to people who do something that I would really dread. And it's sitting in your chairs and reading all those meeting notes and then trying to figure out the best course of action. And aren't we fortunate that we have people that live generously in different ways? So that's all I have to say is thank you, and that there are people in town who really are very excited about Habitat being able to offer home ownership opportunities, because we all know what a big problem our community is facing, and that you're helping guide through it. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there others who have comments for items not on the agenda? Yes.
Hello, testing. My name is Tom Kaczynski. I live at 610 Devon Drive, and I've been going probably, this is my 8th year here. Been coming to various town board meetings, housing meetings for the past 4 or 5 years. And I wonder, you know, a lot of these housing, everybody references the route policy where it says we need, what was it, 2,500 homes by 2030. And I wonder if that was kind of an inflated number, because when I talk, and I know you talk about the hospital workers and others, but the people that, you know, the younger crowd that I come across in the hospital, the people who draw my blood, I ask about living up here, and they're happy with coming from the valley because their friends are there. There's Kohl's shopping and Marshall shopping. They have so they're happy and they choose to live down there, but they love to work up here. So the housing needs, it's always affordability, attainable, and workforce, and AMI, all that verbiage. But there's always saying, we need housing, we need housing, we need housing. And I've always asked, where's the list? Where is the list that we need housing? And are we building the housing that people need? So you've got this handout here. This one I printed off the other day. Up on Raven, built by Habitat for Humanity for $350,000 for sale. It's been on the market for 115 days. So if there's this big list of people who need housing, where's the list? Because there's also other properties for sale around town that are under, I'm on the clock, under 350 that could be bought. So where's the list? Who's got the list? And how updated is that? And another, I can't solve the problem, but maybe the town board or some people put up something in Bond Park where you can put out a flyer and say, tell us your thoughts about housing, what do you need? And maybe get some information from there, because I'm not seeing it with need housing and this being on the market. Oh, I'm out of time. And bingo, what's his name? Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Are there other comments for items not on the agenda? All right, we'll move forth. Town board comments and liaison reports. Trustee Maris, you're first this time.
Mayor Hall, nothing to report this week. Thanks.
Thank you. Trustee
Mayor, just
Agel.
one thing, Trustee Eshelman and I are having a trustee talk in this room. It's way less formal, very very low-key, talking about whatever you want to talk about for a few minutes each. They are great opportunities to connect with trustees, not here, not limited to 3 minutes and in a conversation. I will not be able to give any of you a ride home because I've already been engaged to take a constituent home afterwards. But that request made me want to reinforce that it's nice to live in a small community where we have those connections with the community. And so I'm glad to be here, and I look forward to seeing people on Thursday, 5:30 in this room with Trustee Eshelman and I. Thanks.
Thank you. Trustee Lancaster.
Yeah, I did attend the Housing Authority Board meeting last Wednesday. Had quite the discussion about different things. The biggest one was they're working on the draft, or reacted to the draft 2027 funding plan for 6C. And we had staff present that to them, and there was quite a bit of discussion around that. We'll hear more about that later. There was some discussion about seasonal housing and serving seasonal workers, which is something they haven't really looked at for quite a while. And they're getting into that more and more. It was interesting, they currently serve, if I got the numbers right for the meeting, 32 seasonal workers. And that is a specialty housing need that we have, and certainly because of our seasonal economy, that's the need. So I thought that was interesting when we heard about that. And that's not just J1 workers or foreign workers. We have a lot of seasonal housing from a lot of different places, but the seasonal workers help keep this community going. And I'm glad they're addressing some of that, and I think there'll be more discussion about the special needs that seasonal workers have as opposed to full-time workers here in the community. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
I am the board's representative for CAST, Colorado Association of Ski Towns, and we have a meeting in Carbondale this Thursday and Friday, so I'll be looking forward to reporting back. Presentation and discussion topics include the wildland urban interface, talking about childcare, the use of AI in municipal operations, decarbonization and electrification of public facilities. So it's a full agenda, and I'll look forward to sharing more. Visit Estes Park Board met last Thursday. I put way too much on my list for tonight's report, especially since we have such a long agenda. So I'll just highlight a couple of things, and if you have any interest in the nitty-gritty details, please follow up with myself or Mayor Hall. We'd love to share more with you. But most importantly, their applications are currently being accepted for a board seat that will start January 2027. Those are available at estes.org/volunteering. And the application window is open through September 4th. So please spread the word. If you or someone you know would be good in that seat, please apply. We'd love to have a good slate to consider. And then just a couple of notes. Staff is working on the fiscal year 27 operating plan and budget. And we approved a joint study session with the Board of County Commissioners on October 27th to review that. Our finance director is retiring shortly. Mike Zumba has been with the organization for a number of years. And so a new finance and admin manager has been hired, and his name is Jorge Rodriguez. He is a local resident, very involved in the Latino Alliance with the Chamber. His family owns a business here. He'll be starting on September 1st. So very, very excited to welcome him to the team. Visit Estes Park started using a research and data firm called Zartico, who has a long history in the DMMO space and really gives a holistic picture for key performance indicators, event stats, spending, geolocation, all the creepy things that get logged about your day-to-day behavior, whether you're a resident or a visitor. So lots of information already coming in on that. We can pull data from past years, not just from the time we started using Zartico and on, and there will be dashboards and reports coming from this. In particular, if you have specific questions about you're interested in a certain event or where people are coming from or average daily spend, or if people are visiting nature parks, all that kind of information is available, and you can reach out to Visit Estes Park with your specific question, and they should be able to look it up and answer that for you. So that's really exciting. Finally, I'll just mention that we also approved a 5-year partnership, renewing a 5-year partnership with Frozen Dead Guy Days. Visit Estes Park does financially support that event. Got a lot of information about visitor type, how long they stay, how much they spend. There was a study done by Frozen Dead Guy Days and a firm that they retained to do this this data gathering, but all of that information was verified by the data that Visit Estes Park gathers independently. So we're right in line with what they're seeing in terms of our visitor demographics. But the board did approve a 5-year kind of step-down support for that event, and great presentation from them. I think the board was excited to support that. I will note that they are working on a date for 2027. It's typically been the last weekend of March, but that's Easter this year, so they're looking at some different dates. And they are working with CSU too to develop a zero waste fest. So I'm excited to hear where that goes and what kind of results can come from the efforts with the university. Again, I've got lots more, but I'll wrap it up there. And if you're interested in more from Visit Estes Park, please reach out. Thanks.
Thank you. Trustee Brown.
So I am liaison to and a member of the Estes Arts District Board. I prefer not to be having to report this, but those of you that might have received the newsletter from the Arts District will know most of this. So the Estes Arts District identified counterfeit checks with unauthorized signatures involving organizational funds. They reported the fraudulent activity, filed a police report, and they're actively pursuing recovery through the appropriate financial, law enforcement, regulatory, and legal challenges. Law enforcement has indicated that this is a common type of financial scam affecting individuals, businesses, and organizations across the country. And financial institutions are facing an evolving fraud environment as criminals increasingly use technologies like artificial intelligence to make scams faster, more scalable, and harder to detect. The matter remains under active investigation, and while recovery efforts continue, Estes Art District is making necessary budget adjustments to account for the current loss and maintain the organization's financial stability, as well as instituting controls to avoid this happening in the future. The board remains committed to advancing its mission of supporting arts and culture throughout the Estes Valley, and I think we'll report more when more is discovered later, but that is where they're at right now.
Trustee Eshelman.
I'm a liaison to the Board of Appeals, have nothing to report tonight, which is good. And then just a second comment on this Thursday, 5:30, trustee talk here. Trustee Eckel, thanks.
Thank you. I had the good fortune today to go out to Rocky Mountain National Park for an annual ceremony. This time it was 29 individuals from 16 different countries received their citizenship. They took the oath of citizenship. They've been working toward it. It was a wide variety, 16 countries. You had, from Colombia to Vietnam and everything in between, both directions. So it was really, that's really one of the events that I really highlight on my calendar. Just a wonderful thing to add those 29 individuals and some members of their family to the great melting pot of America and bring their creativity, ingenuity, and energy to join with the rest of us. So that was a good thing. Thanks for the update, Mayor Pro Tem, on VEP. Saves me time there on that. I want to make one other comment. I run around town a lot, not just during the weekdays, but on the weekends. And somebody I run into on the weekends a lot is our manager of the transportation and parking and stuff, Dana Klein. The guy is a dynamo on weekends because that's the time when some of the greatest stresses are put on our parking and transportation. And he is not only monitoring, analyzing, but moving cones, just doing whatever. So just kudos to Dana Klein for the work that he puts in to try to really help incrementally improve our transportation options in town. Step by step, we'll cover more and more with the different shuttles. I think we're actually expanding shuttle service. I saw the note from the town coming out to go on a few weeks longer. And it's those steps that are getting us closer to having a real mass transit opportunity in town be much broader and help other causes. That's all I'll go into here. Town Administrator, you have a report?
Thank you, Mayor. 2 items tonight. First, I would like to recognize our Water Division staff. They recently completed the state sanitary survey, which is a comprehensive inspection of our treatment plants, 9 storage tanks, operational records, and overall facility maintenance. They passed that with no violations observed. That successful outcome directly reflects the dedication, technical expertise of our team in protecting public health and maintaining regulatory compliance with our water system. So a big shout out to Jason Fredericks, Jason Lang, Deb Callahan, James Rossi, and their teams for that successful completion, as well as our utility director, Ruben Bergston. Really appreciate all their hard work and what they do every day to provide us with a very simple resource that is very complex to create. Secondly, if you've been following our conversations closely, members of the public might have expected to see something relative to a temporary use permit for Lot 4 tonight. I do want to close the loop on that one. We do not expect that to come back to the board. I did want to update you all, as well as anybody that may be following that in the public, that we are currently working with the state to formally define that restricted covenant area on that property. And that is where we are at this point. So I did want to close the loop on that one, since people might be wondering why that is not on the agenda tonight.
Definition of that would be a good thing for all, I think. So thanks for working in that direction. Okay, we can move on to the consent agenda. I will first read the consent agenda into the record in its completeness. Item 1, expenditure approval list, which are bills. Item 2, town board meeting and study session minutes dated August 11th, 2026. Item 3, Estes Park Planning Commission meeting minutes dated July 21st, 2026. Acknowledgement only. And item 4, it's a short consent agenda. Resolution 9526, intergovernmental agreement with the Estes Park School District for emergency fleet shop space sharing. Does any member of the public or the town board request to have an item removed from the consent agenda for further discussion? I don't see any. I would take a motion.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'd second the motion.
Mayor Pro Tem Hazelton moved to approve the consent agenda as written. Trustee Eigel seconded, and we'll vote. And the consent agenda passes unanimously. We'll move on to reports and discussion items, outside entities. Item 1 on that, hurrah, we have a new fire chief introduction and the Thunder Mountain project update. And so fire chief, no more interim, no more, whatever. Fire chief, none. Welcome.
Thank you. Is this on? Okay.
Yes.
The green. Good evening to all the trustees. I've met some of you. My name is Kevin Nunn. I'm the new fire chief, and I'm excited to be here. I think the old joke goes, I wasn't born here, but I got here as soon as I could. So it was. I got a lot of work has come in the last 30 days to figure out where I'm at, how to work best in the town structure. And like I said, I've met some of you individually and looking forward to meeting more of you, and even more people behind me. I'll be meeting them too. Kind of like the mayor said, I walk the town. I'm trying to get out there and learn it and grow with it. Any questions that I can answer about myself, or kind of...
You've really been drinking from the fire hose, haven't you?
I really have, yes.
Wow, that's pretty relevant here.
That
That's a big
is-
fire hose. Yeah,
It's very true.
Yeah.
But it's okay, I signed up for that.
Well, yeah, thanks so much for being here, for applying, and glad to have you on there. I will give one last kudo to our interim chief. He really did a fabulous job in 9 months and prepared a lot of ground and helped move things forward. So I think the reins you're able to take hold of are in better shape than they would have been a year ago.
I totally agree. I see evidence of that every day.
Yep. Other questions or comments to Fire Chief? None? All good?
The to go to the discussion point, Thunder Mountain project update. Wildfire mitigation is on everybody's mind, and or at least the wildfire threat, and you're going to be discussing that soon at your conference. Is on everybody's mind. We're doing, moving forward with one project in particular, and that's Thunder Mountain. 200 acres of forest thinning and mastication, and that's provided by a federal grant called the Community Wildfire Defense Grant. So you'll see signs, you'll see evidence up there of them doing that work. So we wanted to let you all know that that's happening.
Excellent. Any mitigation is good mitigation, and very much appreciate that occurring. Other questions? All good.
Okay.
We love our fire districts, so thanks so much.
Okay. Thanks.
We will move on to Planning Commission items, and boy, these look familiar. The action items 1A, B, and C are resolutions 8726, Fall River Village 2, and I see I actually have to open at least one, I think it's actually 3 public hearings, and so I may, on the second and the third one, depending where we get with the first one, may use a little bit of shorthand, but let's go ahead with item 1A there, Resolution 8726, Fall River Village 2, Combined Preliminary Final Planned Unit Development Plan, Owner Applicant, Estes Park Housing Authority. At this hearing, the Board of Trustees shall consider the information presented during the public hearing from the town staff, from the applicant, public comment, and written comments received on the application. Has any trustee had any ex parte communications concerning the application, this application, which are not part of the board packet? Any member of the board may ask questions at any stage of the public hearing, which may be responded to at that time. I should point out that none of the trustees indicated ex parte communication, since they all did it silently. And so this public hearing is open. Welcome back, Mr. Hornbeck. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor and trustees. So at the July 28th hearing, I presented the background and analysis of this project. That information is in the packet. I'm not going to repeat myself on that. I do want to touch on a few items that came up to maybe try and answer some questions. First is just kind of big picture, the purpose of a PUD. So a PUD is a land use tool which can provide flexibility from zone district standards, such as lot size, building setbacks, et cetera. They are permitted as a zoning overlay by the Development Code and also enabled through the PUD Act of 1972. And that act allows governments the discretion to negotiate almost every aspect of the proposed development in return for PUD approval. In theory, the plan development process protects the public interest by trading off more flexibility, local government regulations for a higher level of forethought, design attention, or community amenities. And that was a quote from a land use attorney planner in Colorado, who's I would say an expert on PUDs and other similar items. So diving into our development code a little more. So Section 9.1 states the purpose of PUDs. It mentions the growing demand for housing of all types, encourages PUDs for the purpose of innovation in residential development and renewal, so that the growing population demands may be met by greater variety in type, design, and layout of buildings. It also encourages PUDs to promote attainable workforce and employee housing. The question of this application and how it's being reviewed as a combined preliminary final PUD was something I also wanted to address to make sure that was clear. The development code provides for a combined preliminary final PUD. This application meets the criteria for that, and as such has been processed and considered under that criteria. And the development code does not contain any provision that would allow the town board to split the application into separate preliminary and final reviews. So it is considered a final review. Lastly, I wanted to clarify this application would have the effect of amending the existing PUD. The existing PUD shown here lays out the site development, site plan, setbacks, parking, etc. That would remain in full force and effect, except for the certain waivers that are requested tonight with this amendment. So the proposed PUD is a text amendment only, addressing uses, waivers, parking, etc. that we covered at the previous hearing. So Planning Commission did recommend approval, and staff does recommend 2 additional conditions, which are reflected in the resolution that were discussed previously regarding landscaping along Farview Drive per the existing plans, as well as updating non-compliant outdoor lighting. With that, sample motions are provided for your reference, and I believe the applicant also has a presentation for you as well.
Are there any other conditions for approval that you haven't reported?
No, sir.
Applicant, you may make your presentation.
Hello, trustees. I'm Pete Levine. I'm the Director of Real Estate Development with the Estes Park Housing Authority. I have a presentation for you. First few slides, a bit of a recap you've seen before, and then we have some new material to look at as well. I thought it would be helpful just to start with what the mission of the Housing Authority is. So the mission of the Estes Park Housing Authority is, in order to ensure a balanced and sustainable community, the Estes Park Housing Authority creates and facilitates housing opportunities and services for persons of low and moderate income. So it's a good mission, and a mission that I'm proud to support as an employee of the Housing Authority. So as we look at the property goals for Fall River Village, I think you'll find that our mission is really reflected in here. The plan is to provide workforce housing at below market rents. So the rental rates currently range between 60 to 80% of area median income. The Prop 123 rules that are also associated with the parcels contain a maximum blended income of 90% AMI for the residents of the property, but in practice, our actual current AMI from a median standpoint, we're at 62%, and then from a mean, we're at 69%, or 70 if you want to round up. So the other goal is to ensure that the property self-sufficiently supports itself. So that means revenues minus operating expenses minus debt payments have to be above zero. And we also want to utilize less of the funding that was pledged to the project. So that includes both the 6E and the regulatory short-term linkage fee, and the business plan that we've discussed will allow us to do so. So from a property summary standpoint, the property was purchased in October of 2024 for $35 million. It contains 2 parcels. We have the lower parcel of 65 units, and then the upper parcel. The upper parcel is what we're talking about today, or tonight. That is with 14 townhome units. It has 8 one-bedroom units, a building with a 4-bedroom and a 1-bedroom unit known as the Cliff House, as well as Skyview. And as part of this acquisition, we received $7 million of Prop 123 equity that is specific to the lower parcel, and those funds came from CHAFA. So for our present preservation strategy, Our plan is to sell approximately 14 townhome units to allow pay down of the debt principal, and that will ensure that the property will not require ongoing subsidies. So what this will preserve is workforce rental units at below market rates for all 65 units on the lower parcel, workforce rental units at below market rate for the 8-unit one-bedroom building on the upper parcel. It creates a situation where Skyview is compatible for it has a compatible use for livability and quality of life for the residents of the workforce housing. And it also preserves the Cliff House building, and we're exploring home-based childcare solutions in this building, and that is that older duplex that I referenced with a 1-bedroom and 4-bedroom unit. So this piggybacks a little bit off of Paul's presentation, but I just wanted to go over the standards of review and how this project does fit with those. So looking at section 3.4.d of the Estes Valley Development Code, this is the standards of review, and I just wanted to pull out a couple of items with it. Number one is the PUD shall be consistent and implement the planning goals, policies, and objective as contained in this code and the comprehensive plan. We know there's a few areas in the code that supports workforce housing, and certainly the comprehensive plan has a number of areas where workforce, attainable, and affordable housing is supported. Number 6 here, the PUD shall provide public benefits that are advantageous to the surrounding neighborhood or the public in general to a greater extent than could have been accomplished through strict applications of otherwise applicable district or development standards. So public benefits of the proposed PUD may include adaptive reuse, renovation, or redevelopment of existing buildings, and then also provisions of attainable workforce or employee housing or other housing solutions that support the housing element of the comprehensive plan. So I want to look at the adaptive reuse aspect of this, because this really ties into the building and fire code. So we're going to be adaptively reusing this property from accommodations for tourists to long-term rentals at below market rate for the Estes workforce. The subdivision requires adaptations of the wall structures and sprinklers in certain buildings in order to reuse this building or these buildings for a new use. So as we look at the building code and fire standards, so a building with no lot line between the units has different fire code requirements than a building with a lot line that exists between units. So if we look at fire rated walls and blocking, as well as a sprinkler system. So looking at this next slide here, this looks from a tangible standpoint of what the adaptive reuse and the upgrades that are required from a building and fire code standpoint. So looking at the image on the left, this is 1, 2, 3, 4. So 5 different buildings require additional fire blocking in the attic with the creation of individual lots. So this is going to require additional fire sheathing because as the property was currently constructed on the current use, that is not a requirement. If we look out on the right-hand side at the duplex lots 13 and 14, the demising wall for this was not 2-hour rated because when it was built and for the use, it was not required to be. So in order to reuse this property for a different use for the workforce, we will either need to improve this wall to a 2-hour fire rating or provide a sprinkler system. And so our plan is to provide a sprinkler system for this lot as well. So I wanted to review that just to be able to establish that there is a adaptive reuse that is occurring on this PUD request. So the other item that came up in our previous hearing was a conversation about the proposed waivers that we were requesting, and I felt that since we are currently amending an existing PUD that has already been amended, it's prudent to look at the number of waivers and what they were this existing PUD compared to ours. So by starting, the existing PUD has 7 waivers. Our proposed PUD is asking for 7. The purpose of the waivers for the existing PUD was to allow a development for visitors and tourism. Our proposed PUD is to preserve workforce housing at below market rents. So these next 3 are subjective. We'll run through each of the waiver requests and you can all make your own personal decisions on what the most impactful for. But reviewing the existing PUD, I felt that these following 3 were the most impactful. So waiver for an 8-foot exception above the max height for Skyview. So the building Skyview itself is 8 feet above what the maximum height in the Estes Valley Development Code does support. We already know from previous meetings that we've had that looking for additional exceptions above the height limit is a big faux pas and is very difficult to get approved currently. There's also a waiver to allow Skyview to be larger than 1,000 square feet. So 1,000 square feet is the maximum square footage allowed as an accessory building. So this building, I think, is 4 or 5 times that minimum size or that maximum size. So again, Skyview has received a waiver not just for height, but also for size. And then lastly, they had a density waiver for 6 more units than was allowed. So there's the height extension, the overall square footage, and then a density exception waiver for the existing PUD. When we look at our proposed PUD, we're requesting a change of minimums due to a change of PUD use to townhome plat. We're looking for use waivers to allow planned uses such as daycare at the Cliff House, and we're also requesting waiver for a loading dock, which also happens to be an existing waiver currently in effect. So I'll just run through these quickly here.
Can I ask you real quick on that last slide, just one easy question? When you brought up the existing PUD exceptions, those look like waivers that, so they were exceptions to the rules at the time. Are those going to be mitigated by the new plan, or are you going to add to those variations on the property?
Out of the 7 waivers, we are keeping 5 in place and getting rid of 2 of them. We are not planning to make height or size adjustments to Skyview.
But Skyview already exceeds the height, so, okay. So you're not mitigating them, you're adding to them.
Correct. So existing PUD waivers. So the first one, we have a minimum curve radii for the streets. So that's looking at the internal streets. The second one is that height waiver of 8 feet from the Estes Valley Development Code. The third one down here is a waiver for the grade of the drive of the road that connects the upper property with the lower property. The fourth one here is a setback of 10 feet for the north and east lines of former Lot 5A. The Sunny Acres addition is requested because the buildings already exist. So I think that's an important note because there's a waiver here that is in place because of an existing building that was previously on site. There's a request to waive the Type A loading dock, which is a waiver that we have as well. There is a request for the accessory building to be larger than 1,000 square feet. And then lastly, there is the waiver of the 6 or more units allowed on that site. So that increases the density from 18 units rather than the 12 units. So now looking at the waivers that we are requesting, the first one is a change that is due to providing workforce housing and child care solutions. So it's really looking to amend and clarify the uses that we plan to have on site. These next 2, these are really in place because these 3 buildings in Lot 1, Lot 12, and Lot 17, they're not townhome buildings, and therefore a waiver is needed. So for number 2 up there, that is because of the smaller lot sizes than code requires for CO lots. And then for the second one, it's because they do not meet the setbacks because they are not townhome lots. These next 2 here, the first one, number 5, these townhomes, again, are 0 lot lines, and therefore the lot does not include the parking space in the street. We'll actually touch on that in a minute, 3 slides from now. I'll go into parking a little bit more in detail. Bottom one here, we have a waiver for warehousing and storage. There's already an existing property management storage space in the basement, so we just plan to utilize what was already there. And again, this goes back to the loading dock and loading waiver that was awarded in the previous PUD. And lastly, this one here where we are requesting a waiver for building envelopes to be shown on the plat for each lot. This is mainly just because the building already exists. The typical purpose of that requirement is to make sure that when the buildings get built, they're actually built on the footprint that is outlined in that final plat. But given that the buildings already exist, it was deemed that that was not going to be necessary. So again, just the comparison from the existing PUD where there was 7 requests, some in my view were quite major, and then we have the 7 proposed waivers that we are requesting that I'll leave to your judgment how they compare to the existing PUD. So lastly here, just coming back to the parking conversation. So I just want to clarify that this is a waiver for parking locations, not the number of parking spots. So the required number of parking spots on site are 80. We are providing those 80 parking spots. It really comes down to the fact that townhome lots are very small from a size standpoint. And so when we look at parking that is actually available, a lot of it's on lots that's owned by the HOA. It's not actually owned on the parcel where that individual building is. So 2 more slides here. So just wanted to review, staff and planning commission both reviewed this PUD prior to coming in front of town board. Town staff, they found 0 disadvantages in amending the PUD. And then we also had a planning commission vote 3-0 to recommend to town board to approve. So lastly, just to summarize, our goal, not just with this property, but really for everything that we do as the housing authority, is to provide workforce housing at below market rents. So the rental rates currently range between 60 to 80% of area median income, and the current tenant AMI median is at 62%. So really doing what we want it to be doing in that standpoint, and the goal of executing this business plan that we've been talking about since 2024 in front of town board, which has always included selling off the higher value units on the upper parcel, is to ensure that the property sufficiently supports itself, meaning that revenues minus operating expenses minus debt payments is above 0. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. How many folks are going to be making public comment on this item? I need a show of hands. If we have a large number, I'll divide a fixed length of time. So I'm seeing maybe 5 or 6. Some of the hands are going up and down. Okay. All right. I'll allow public comment, and we'll use the full 3 minutes at this point for each of the public comments.
My name is Terry Rustin. I live at 555B Devon Drive in Estes Park. Mr. Mayor, trustees, I wish to comment on Resolution 8726, which is before the trustees at this moment. Trustee Brown often reminds us of the historical content of an issue, so I will also. In 2008, thousands of Americans were enticed by the housing and lending industries to ignore logic and the lessons of the Great Depression. They committed to mortgages and credit accounts that they could not afford to pay for. When desperate homeowners sought dispensations from lenders in 2008, they were told, "We are not to blame for your failure to live within your means." In Arizona, California, Florida, and Nevada, mortgage delinquency reached 35%. There were 936,439 home foreclosures in the United States. Lehman Brothers, Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley, and Goldman Sachs all went bankrupt. 25 major banks and dozens of small banks failed, including Washington Mutual, with $307 billion in assets. Many economists and historians have written about the cause of the financial collapse of 2008. Robert Shiller said that people were caught up in, quote, contagious optimism, seemingly impervious to facts that often takes hold when prices are rising. In 1905, George Santayana wrote, "Those who cannot remember the past are doomed to repeat it." The reason this historical review is relevant is a resolution before the trustees at this moment. Resolution 8726 is listed on the agenda of the meeting as follows. Presented by Senior Planner Horbeck, reopening the public hearing to consider a proposal to amend existing planned unit development zoning overlay. At the previous meeting when Resolution 8726 was discussed, Mr. Hornbeck stated as follows.
The development code does not contemplate or have any application for an amendment to a PUD. There is a minor modification available to development plans, PUDs, which essentially is an amendment. This application does not qualify for that, so it is viewed as a new PUD that, in essence, is amending.
Mr. Hornbeck.
We have 30 seconds left.
What's that?
30 seconds left.
The Housing Authority, The leadership of the Housing Authority, being young and heedless of the lessons of 2008, has committed the Housing Authority to expenditures far beyond its means. They have made decisions and signed contracts that the Housing Authority cannot afford. Now they want this Board of Trustees to bail out the Housing Authority. If you do, they will soon be enticed by another shiny object that the Housing Authority cannot afford. Thank you.
Thank you. Next public commenter.
Board, thanks for being here tonight. Appreciate what you guys do. I know most of you, if not, you probably know me.
Can you say?
Ryan,
Yeah, there you go.
Ryan Leahy.
There you go.
I could address you today in a lot of different facets. I've been in the community for a long time, and that's how I'd like to address you today as a community member and a taxpayer. And pretty simple guy. As a simple guy, I definitely value quality, respect, craftsmanship. I'm not sure how many of you have been to Fall River Village or up to the Skyview up there, but it is one of the nicest venues in town. It is really a nice setup. And to think that we're going to turn that into, I don't know, maybe daycare, maybe the Housing Authority office. I'm not sure, but we'd like to preserve the right to go ahead and rent it out as the town or as the Housing Authority is really frustrating to me. And to break it down, we can talk about finances and numbers if you want. I'd like to be a little more simple about it. If I drove a Lamborghini, if somebody gave me a Lamborghini, I would have no money in that Lamborghini, and I would still go sell that Lamborghini. Does not fit my need. It does not fit my value. There is cost to owning it. I have to maintain it. I have to store it. I have to protect it, insure it. I have no value in that Lamborghini. I'm going to go get something more practical, probably a little bit flashy because I have the ability, but it'll be nice. I can guarantee it'll be reliable. I feel like we are giving the Housing Authority a Lamborghini, and we're asking people that need help in this community for housing to go there and receive help from them. I've heard a couple different things that they need it for, or reasons that they want to use it. One is childcare. Well, the town already owns 1250 Woodstock, which has housing or childcare on it. Lots of room to expand. Great placement for it, right by the school, where it probably should be. I've heard noise. I've heard lots of concerns about noise, but we weren't concerned about noise when it was Davis Hill people complaining, Black Canyon, Performance Park, the events complex. The reality is we live in a tourist town with tourist events, and we have to balance that.
30 seconds.
Appreciate that. We have to balance that. And I think that we all do a pretty good job. Sometimes it's a little bit messy, it pushes back, but that's not one reason to remove that. The fact, though, is this Lamborghini was not free. It cost the taxpayers, and we continue to pay for that. It's financed, and we pay for it every day. Why don't we sell that, use those assets, and apply them where they can be best used to provide the housing to the community instead of stubbing the noses at the taxpayers?
Thank you. Next.
Hello, Christine Alpopitz, 650 Devon Drive. I handed out a bunch of information. I'm sorry I haven't been feeling well, but I wanted to get it in. I know it's a lot of information, but I hope that you read it. It's very important. So just what I want to speak about is the overall vagueness and uncertainty about whether this is a new application or amended application, minor or major amendment. I believe all needs to be clarified and understood by all parties. It directly affects Ordinance 1125. Staff stated at the August 11th Town Board meeting, quote, staff's interpretation is that Ordinance 1125 does not apply to this particular application. Per Town Attorney Kramer at the same meeting, Trustee Eigel was quoted in his quote, there may be some application of the ordinance that the citizens voted for. Am I close or am I completely off base with that? Attorney Kramer responded, Trustee Eigel, that would be a matter of interpretation. Trustee Eigel asked, whose interpretation? Attorney Kramer responded, the town board's ultimately. What is the town board's ultimate interpretation? Ordinance 1125 applies to all rezonings and PUD applications. If this PUD would be approved, how would the voters feel about how you're treating their recent vote? Continuing on, staff bases their interpretation as a statute that does not refer to a preliminary plat for the PUD, which needs to be approved prior to the final plat. I understand this evening Senior Planner Hornbeck said that the two are tied together. However, Ordinance 1125 applies to PUDs, and preliminary plat is the first of a three-step hearing. There are 3 hearings listed up above, and their claim about the statute refers to a final plat, not the preliminary plat. So please revisit the importance of applying Ordinance 1125. The point of this PUD seems to be the housing authorities need to solve serious financing and debt issues with this property to their benefit. Per the Estes Park Development Code, Section 3.4D.6, the section does not merely require a PUD to provide some public benefits, it requires the PUD to provide public benefits, plural, advantageous to the surrounding neighborhood or the general public to a greater extent than could have been established through strict application of the otherwise district or development standards. How is helping the Estes Park finances a greater extent for the public?
30 seconds.
Thank you, Mayor. 2 quick questions. If the PUD is approved, would purchasers of the Fall River Village townhomes be required to pay the vacation home workforce housing regulatory linkage fee before receiving an STR license? And how would that fit into the 322 STR cap? And lastly, if the town believes that any potential purchaser could qualify for the commercial outlying zoning exemption in Municipal Code 5.20.120C, please explain how those purchasers would satisfy the statutory requirement that the property has not been used for purposes of household living since becoming a vacation
We're
home,
at time.
given the town's own staff has been using it for workforce housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor Hall and trustees. My name is Paul Peterbaugh. I submitted some written materials for you all yesterday. Hopefully you've all seen that. And so I won't repeat those, the contents of those tonight, but I would like to make a few additional points. First, I am not asking you tonight to decide that my acquisition proposal is the right answer. I am not asking the town board or the housing authority to negotiate a real estate transaction from the DS. I respect the housing authority, its independence, and its workforce housing mission, and I have supported workforce housing in Estes Park for many years and played a significant role in the design and entitlement of what ultimately became the 94-unit Prospector Apartments. But the housing authority itself has acknowledged that the current financial structure of Fall River Village is not self-sustaining. I think there's a very important reason for that. The project is carrying debt associated with a very valuable, purpose-built event venue that is no longer being used in its highest and best use, or producing the revenue it was designed to generate. Selling productive townhomes may reduce that debt, but it does not solve the underlying mismatch or make that building viable office space. There is another alternative. I have already made a serious proposal to acquire Upper Fall River Village and Skyview together, and I'm now prepared to substantially improve that proposal if the Workforce Housing Authority is willing to re-engage in serious discussions. That alternative would not only ensure the success and viability of 65 workforce housing units below, it would also preserve Skyview and Upper FRV as important tourism assets, restore significant tax revenue and local economic activity, free up millions of dollars of debt burden from the venue, and provide the EPHA with significant additional financial resources to pursue a greater number of more suitable housing units. There is one other important point. Questions have been raised about whether Skyview can operate without disturbing the residents below it. The answer is yes, it can, and we've already proved that. When I built Skyview, one of my greatest concerns was protecting our high-paying guests below, and we did so with a very disciplined operational protocol that had produced almost no complaints. So my request tonight is very simple.
30 seconds.
My request tonight is very simple, thank you. Please, don't make an irreversible decision before the alternative has been fully evaluated. Once these townhomes begin selling individually, the ownership dynamics change permanently. Skyview may remain an allowed event use on paper, but zoning permission is not the same thing as operating viability. Putting the property together later may not be possible. So a continuation preserves every option, but an approval eliminates some of them.
We're at time.
Please give us time to re-engage and figure out a better solution. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions for me while I'm here? No? Okay.
Next public commenter.
Hello, good evening, Mayor and trustees. My name is Carrie Messenger. I own or co-own 9 short-term rental units in Estes Park. And as we know, in January of '23, the town implemented a workforce housing linkage fee of roughly $1,500 a year per unit. So every January for the last 4 years, I've contributed roughly $14,000 to the Workforce Housing Fund. And with that sudden and that impactful of an added fee, I feel like I'm justified in wanting and needing to know that I can trust that that's being spent wisely and that we're maximizing those funds in actually benefiting the workforce housing. So when I read that the Housing Authority was buying Fall River Village and using the units as workforce housing and Skyview as daycare or now offices, I had some questions. So we have heard that the Housing Authority purchased Fall River Village and they considered that Skyview was essentially free. We've also heard that the income generated from the rental of the units was not adequate to service the debt long-term, so that the current financial situation is unsustainable. So my first question is, wouldn't it be logical to think a relatively new, absolutely spectacular high-end event center with incredible views would be worth several $1 million? And if sold, wouldn't those proceeds be available to pay down some of that unsustainable debt? And if the answer is yes, then Skyview clearly isn't free. It's a very valuable asset. And does it make economic sense? And is the image we want for a small town housing authority to have their offices in a multi-million-dollar luxury event center? I would say the same question would apply for the upper townhomes. And if anybody's been through those, these are some of the very nicest townhomes in all of Estes Park. They're large, they're high-end units, they're thoughtfully put together, they have luxury finishes, multiple bedrooms, beautiful decks, extraordinary mountain views. But are they appropriate for subsidized housing? And I think we can all agree that we need affordable workforce housing, but are these particular assets the smartest and most financially responsible way to provide it? And is having the Housing Authority's office in a multi-million-dollar state-of-the-art event center
30 seconds.
what those funds were really intended to accomplish, especially since there's ample office space down below in the lower units? So my fundamental question would be not whether we are in favor or opposed to workforce housing, but is this particular plan the best use of millions of dollars of public resources and some of the best valuable real estate that the Housing Authority owns? So I hope the board would ask those questions before making an irreversible decision. I got in under 3 minutes.
Just in time. Good
right.
job. Thank you. Next. All right.
That might not have been a bad idea. I'm Laura Rustin, 555B Devon Drive. I did not plan to speak, but I do. I would like to point again, and I have said this many times, that a constant refrain from the trustees and from government officials is, what do the people want? And it seems pretty clearly that the people wanted 1125 to become an ordinance, a law in the town. Terry played earlier, Mr. Hornbeck speaking last month saying this was not an amendment, this was a new PUD, it's a whole new thing. I don't know what else to say, except there's so much controversy and, dare I say, misunderstanding about what this is all about. And I think that generally, if you listen to the people who have spoken, from many different angles, they have raised questions about this resolution. And I wish you would consider some of the questions that have been raised and what the answers ought to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have other public comment? Seeing none, the applicant has an opportunity to make a rebuttal. All right. In that case, Board of Trustees, do you have questions or comments concerning the application while we're still in public hearing? I will make one comment. I was new to this board when this deal was put together a couple of years ago. I remember a lot of our comments about what an opportunity to get this 90-unit opportunity. And part of those discussions in front of this board during the different iterations indicated that at some point you're going to sell off some of those top units. It was 12 or 14 or 15. I don't remember the number at the time, but approximately that. And so I still see this as coming full circle to that was the original proposal of selling off to allow the lower units to be viable for workforce housing.
Mayor, I want to thank you for bringing that up, and now I will make one comment. Whenever you're attempting to create housing that is below market rate, you're at odds with the market. And on some level, that housing has to be subsidized. There are many models in how that housing can then be subsidized. What we're most commonly familiar with are low-income housing tax credits. There's opportunity zones. That is partly what Prospector used that Mr. Peterball brought up. But at a core, every single one of those tools, including our tool, which we have used in this Estes Valley on 3 other occasions, each one of those tools is meant to provide a level of subsidy, whether that's selling higher value assets to subsidize the lower rent or sales price, or that's using tax tools that are then used to provide equity to a development. So what we're doing here is nothing unique. It has been done by us in the Estes Valley in the past, most notably with Vista Ridge and the Pines, where we sold off roughly half of those units to subsidize below market rents to provide housing that the community needs. So this was the plan all along, and it is an appropriate and necessary step that agencies like ours must take to be able to provide less than market rate housing. It is simply how this works in a complicated market.
Thank you, Trustee Lancaster.
Don't go away, Scott. So I was going to say the same thing, Mr. Mayor. I was here when the original plan to purchase this was done. And from the very beginning, the idea was to sell off a number of the units to raise capital to subsidize the rest of them. In fact, as I understand, even the original plan is exactly what Mr. Messenger was talking about. Sell off those upper higher end units to raise cash so that you could subsidize the ones down below. So there seems to be some misunderstanding that this is some new thing that you've got yourself a financial problem and now you're selling off assets. But this, I remember this was the plan before we even purchased the property, that this is how you could make it work. So this is not anything new. Couple things there. I mean, I certainly understand Skyview, probably more than most. My son and his fiance had a contract to get married there. And then it got sold out from underneath them and we had to scramble and find somewhere else to go. So it is a beautiful facility, and I'm sorry it's so beautiful that you have to find a place to use it. Too bad it's not uglier. But the question is, I have a couple questions. Would what we're doing tonight negate the ability, if later on, whether Mr. Peterbaugh or anyone else came in with a proposal to buy the entire upper section as a single package, would anything we're doing negate that? That still could be a consideration?
I would have to look to the two land use experts, maybe three in the room, to answer that question.
I mean, they might be just buying multiple parcels instead of just one, but
I don't know if the land use action would preclude going back to its original use as
Okay.
a lodging facility. I can't answer that.
well, not even, well, lodging for whatever use the new owner would purchase it for.
I think to more directly answer your question, as long as the land use wouldn't keep a prospective buyer from using it for that use, I don't believe it
So you
would
could
stop
sell
them.
it to 14 different people, or you could somebody come in and buy the whole thing and develop it and sell it as a package. What we're doing tonight wouldn't make a difference in that.
From my perspective, no.
I'm looking,
Trustee
Yes.
Lancaster, since you're looking my way,
Yes.
depending on what that developer wanted to do, they might need further approvals from the
Sure.
town. But no, nothing would preclude that sort of approval from eventually happening in a way to facilitate what you're talking about.
and if we didn't do anything and they bought it as currently as a PUD and they wanted to do something different, they still would have to come in and get some kind of, unless it was an exact fit for what the current PUD.
That's right, Trustee Lancaster, depending on what they wanted to do, if it was an exact fit for what the current PUD allowed, then possibly not.
Okay. Yeah. Is there anything that would preclude selling off just the Skyview? If somebody would just want to invest in that as a venue and came and wanted to just buy that and use that?
The direct answer is no, but I think it is critical to remember that when the Estes Park Housing Authority made this purchase, we knew we were taking this asset off the commercial market. And a primary concern of ours became the compatibility of the use of that building specifically with the workforce housing, both that will remain up top and the 65 units down below. The compatibility of any entertainment venue right in the middle of workforce housing is a primary concern, as it can negatively, and often does, negatively impact the ability of those living on site to enjoy the home that they rent. So that is a primary concern.
And I think you're right, but what we're doing tonight, or considering, that's a separate issue, whether we do this or don't do this, you could sell it off and use it for something else, or you could use it as a venue. It's not related to what we're doing directly to what we're happening here.
I believe that statement is true.
Trustee Lancaster, the one thing I would add, and Senior Planner Hornbeck could speak more to this, is to make sure the occupancy limitations are taken into account as well. That's the one caveat I would have for that.
And that would, no matter what the use of, we have to meet the occupancy of that, what that facility can
As
handle.
I understand it, this PUD that's before you tonight would limit the occupancy further than it's currently limited.
So it actually restrict it even more. Yeah, okay. You know, this is weird because it's a PUD of something that's already existing. And that's very strange that we do that. Normally, you negotiate it, and you talk about, well, move this wall or make this building smaller. I mean, we talked today, presented about the height. They got a height waiver. Well, we're not gonna take the height waiver, we're gonna chop off the top 6 feet of the building. You know, it's, what's on the ground is there. So this is kind of unusual that we're dealing with something that already exists. And I know, going back to Mr. Peterod, what he did with that facility was amazing, because I remember when I first moved to town, it was all boarded up, things were halfway done, the place was a mess. Prior to that, I believe it was a mobile home park. It was kind of an eyesore on the end of town. And that's when this financing group, and got into the Swiss company, as I understand, built Fall River Village, kind of. They only built it about halfway, and then they went bankrupt. I think, could it be, as Mr. Rustin said, it might have been during that 2008 time period. And they went under, and the thing sat vacant and was an eyesore for a long time, and luckily we had a developer came and brought it up to speed, brought it to where this place is here. So there's been a rough history for this property for a long time. My last question, which I think is the 100-pound gorilla in the room, is, and I think this is really addressed to the attorney, because with all due respect to staff, they're not legal staff. Is this a new PUD application, or is this an application that was filed prior to the election? And to me, that's a fundamental question of where this needs to go.
Trustee Lancaster, this was filed prior to the election. That's very much my understanding. I think there's a question that's been bounced around about whether this is a new PUD or an amendment to a PUD or an amended PUD. The question between whether it's an amendment to a PUD or an amended PUD is really splitting hairs. From my perspective, the main thing we need to keep in account is that the development code does not provide a process for amendments to a PUD. It does not provide a special process for amendments, a special process for amended PUDs. What it provides is a process for a preliminary and final PUD to be submitted as a package. And so this is being analyzed as a new PUD would be analyzed, even though it's an amended PUD because there was a PUD before it. The important thing from my perspective is that no matter how we characterize it, we're required to follow the review criteria for PUDs as laid out in the development code and as planning staff has laid them out for you all. So if it meets those standards of review, then it needs to be approved. If it does not meet those standards of review, then it needs not to be approved. So as long as we keep those in focus, the rest of the question of what kind of amendment is it, that fades away.
Okay, but the timing of the application was prior to the election.
The timing of the application was prior to the election.
And finally, I know there's a statutory requirement on approvals or something. Can you quote that for us again, and of how that works, of where we are from out of our hands of state statutes regarding this that affects
Sure.
this?
Trustee Lancaster, there's a statute called the Vested Rights Statute, and it provides a number of things. One of the things it provides is that for certain types of land use application, the regulations from the local government that are in effect at the time of the application are the ones that it needs to be judged by. And the local government cannot add new regulations after that, absent certain exceptions that no one is arguing apply here. So in those circumstances, we have to apply those pre-existing regulations. The statute lays out what kinds of applications that applies to, and then tosses the ball to the local government to lay those out even further. And we have done so in our development code. We have laid out, I forget the section citation, but there's a section of the development code that says these are the types of application that qualify under that statute. They're called site-specific development plans. And one of those types of application is a planned unit development, specifically a final planned unit development. And the interpretation that staff has made here is that because the development code says that a preliminary / final planned unit development, which is a narrow category that only certain types of application can fall into, because that is a final planned unit development, that it therefore qualifies under that vested rights statute, and we have to follow those pre-existing regulations. That's the interpretation from staff, and that's as far as we can go with it. The rest of the interpretation comes from the town board as you make the decision on the application.
Thank you.
Trustee Eigel.
Can you continue with that and outline the time constraint that we're under tonight?
Trustee Eigel, the time constraint that we're under tonight is under a different section of the development code. And what is it? Senior Planner Hornbeck, 30 days. We can pull up that section, but essentially the town board needs to make a decision on the application within a certain amount of time or have consent from the housing authority, or the application is automatically deemed approved. And that's something that we always try to avoid, no matter which way the town board goes with an application. Staff always wants to set up the town board to be able to make a decision one way or the other.
Okay, well, we've continued this a couple of times, and obviously we need to make a decision on it tonight. I do want to clarify a point that Trustee Lancaster made, which was if we if we approve this tonight, I believe we do preclude this use for another use that it is currently allowed, which is what I think the sale offer was for, was to use it as it is currently permitted, but approving this would change that completely. I think that was mischaracterized. I also want to just ask real quickly, refer back to part of the presentation that Paul made. When he was describing PUDs, he said, the town makes trades in regulations for a higher level of forethought design. And I'm struggling with the retrospective look at this, and as Pete was outlining, the adaptive reuse is blocking and sprinklers. I'm struggling with that definition by the Housing Authority to provide us with some definition of creative benefit to the community. I have a large list of things that I want to raise here, and I know that you're anticipating this from me, but I think that's due because this is a very significant decision for this property and for the Housing Authority and for the community. So I have compiled some notes over the last several days that I want to go through here briefly. If you'll bear with me, I'm going to lay out some of the points that we should be considering. After listening to this presentation and the discussion, I want to bring my comments back to what I believe is our responsibility in this particular decision. This is a PUD decision. The Housing Authority's financial circumstances, debt, or any future transactions involving this property, any perception of an obligation by this town board to support the Housing Authority financially should not be part of this conversation. Attorney, you step in if I cross the line on anything that I say, because I want to give accurate information and I want it to be redefined if it's not, if you don't mind. So this conversation should not be a reflection of what we talked about when we approved it. And Director Moulton, I do not mean to make you stand here. I do not have any questions for you. But I'm going to go on. So this is not about our moral obligation. This is a PUD conversation. So my question is whether this application meets the standards in our development code today. Now, after I have reviewed the application and the record that we have before us, the July discussion, additional information we've received, and we saw a bunch of slides this evening. I could not find those slides in the packet. Were those slides provided to us? You could just nod your head yes or no, and we did not have those slides to consider. Is that accurate? Just so for the record, those slides were not available to the trustees prior to the meeting. That's accurate? Okay, thank you, because that's some new information, and I think that's why we split things up. So we have preliminary and then we have final. So that's another concern, but I don't believe we have the evidence necessary to make several of the required findings. So I'm going to elaborate, and I want to start with the standards themselves. This application asks us to approve substantial deviations from the standards that would otherwise apply. There are undersized lots, the 0-foot internal setbacks, parking that is not assigned to a lot, but we heard they're flexible, elimination of required building envelopes, a loading space waiver, sidewalk waiver on far view, increased multifamily density, and expanded permitted uses including offices, storage, event facility, and daycare. So this application also changes the zoning and permitted use framework for portions of the property. So I'm not saying that a PUD can't have variations. That's exactly why we have PUDs. But there has to be a reason for this board to grant those variations. Our code says that modified or varied standards require a finding that a PUD incorporates creative site design that represents an improvement in quality over what could have been accomplished by us applying those normal standards. I don't believe that finding's been demonstrated. In several cases, the justification for the waiver is essentially the property is already built. The normal standard would make future changes less flexible. But I don't think property owner flexibility is an improvement in quality for the community. The second issue is public benefit. Our code says the PUD must provide public benefits advantageous to the neighborhood or the public to a greater extent than could have been accomplished through strict application of the otherwise applicable standards. Not germane to this conversation in a PUD, but we've heard testimony introduced tonight that the Housing Authority may have other business decisions to make that could reveal a better use of this property financially. We're not talking about that in our decision-making tonight. So I recognize workforce housing has a public benefit, but that's not the question that the code asks us to answer in this hearing. The question is whether the public benefit created by granting these deviations is greater than what could have been accomplished without these deviations. And I don't believe the record establishes that. The third question that I have, it's a concern about adverse impacts. The code requires adverse impacts on adjacent properties to be mitigated to the maximum extent feasible. Now, the staff report that I read said there are no adverse impacts anticipated. But then it goes on to say, shared parking may create challenges if event demand is greater than anticipated, and that the HOA or a parking management company might have to use permits or some kind of future HOA enforcement. It also recognizes that the town or fire district might have to step in because of challenges or adverse impacts that may be created. I'm not saying they will occur, but I'm saying the record doesn't establish that this proposal adequately mitigated those risks to the maximum extent feasible. So this isn't a minor event use that's disappearing from the proposal. The proposed PUD that we are voting on tonight specifically authorizes an event facility with operations from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. and a capacity of nearly 100 people during non-office hours. So we're creating a permanent ownership structure around a property that retains an event use while relying substantially on all of those units sharing parking and future HOA enforcement to manage those impacts. So I don't think we've demonstrated this is a better land use arrangement. It brings me to another concern I think is particularly important in this application. We aren't approving a continued use of this property. We're creating a much more complicated ownership structure. When we consider options, or you contemplate out loud what those options are, this gets complicated. This proposal divides what is now an integrated property into at least 14 individual lots and different ownership interests. And while some of the uses, parking and operations, remain dependent on one another to function in that neighborhood. The application itself tells us that many parking spaces will not be assigned to individual lots. They'll be available on a first-come, first-served basis. And the events facility capacity depends upon that shared parking. And it changes if they introduce daycare and any other plans that they might have that we have not clearly defined on paper. There are a lot of what-ifs, and even the Housing Authority has commented that this office use is temporary. So at the same time, we've heard from the Housing Authority in prior presentations that individual properties could ultimately be sold individually or in bulk, depending on circumstances and their future plans. So I don't criticize them for considering options. That's their responsibility to make those decisions. But those statements tell me that we don't actually know what the long-term ownership and operational structure will be. That matters when we're being asked to approve a permanent subdivision and a set of land use rights that will survive any change of ownership. Once those individual properties are sold, the interests of the owners of the upper properties, the residents of the workforce housing, and the operator of the events facility, they might not all work together well like they're saying they may today. So we can put conditions on the PUD, we can require the HOA to enforce parking, but we can't assume that every future owner will have the same priorities that the Housing Authority talks about today. It's another reason I'm not comfortable making the findings for approval, and I want to be clear about this not being about workforce housing. I'm not saying that events in workforce housing can't exist. I'm not asking this board tonight to decide what the best use of the property is. In fact, that's a decision we should not be making in this PUD hearing. There may be different ways to use or sell the property in the future. The Housing Authority can decide which way they go once they've gotten direction from this hearing. A denial of this PUD doesn't prevent any of those conversations from occurring. A denial does preserve the existing land use framework while we make sure and take time that any future proposal comes to us on its own merits. Has the Housing Authority demonstrated that this particular PUD amendment is the better public outcome and that the requested deviations produce the improvement in quality and greater public benefit required by our code? Now, I believe that we have demonstrated clearly the financial need for this PUD and a reason that they want this Housing Authority amended PUD approved. But I don't believe that this application demonstrates the PUD itself meets the higher standard. So that's an important distinction. I don't think this application fails because workforce housing isn't a benefit. It is. I believe the application has failed to demonstrate that the particular PUD exceptions produce the additional public benefit and improvement in quality required by our code, while adequately mitigating any future impacts of the uses we are being asked to approve tonight. Because of that, I don't think the application record is sufficient. I'll be voting no, if that didn't come through in my comments so far. But I want to be clear about what my vote means. It is not against the Housing Authority, it's not against workforce housing, and it's not a decision about the future of Fall River Village. By voting no, I'm preserving the opportunity to determine what that land use will be in the future. I'm going to stop there. I appreciate the opportunity to make these comments after hours and days of research with this. Thanks, Mayor.
Director Moulton, I'd rather go to some trustee comments and then give you the opportunity to make add-ons. So, Trustee Brown.
Okay, it should come as no surprise to anyone here that I support this, but I want to put it in context. So around Colorado, this has been an ongoing problem, particularly in communities like ours. In Durango, there was a hotel that was converted to workforce housing. Usually you can convert much less expensively than you can building new. And this is a similar sort of thing here. We got this property for a price that was less than its appraised value. Now, admittedly, its appraised value was at its prior use. And as workforce housing, it is probably worth less as a result. So in the course of this, we looked at what our options were from a standpoint of workforce housing and what opportunity this presented. And I should say, prior to being elected to town board, I was on the Housing Authority Board. I was liaison in my first 2 years here to the Housing Authority. I'm no longer a liaison, but I was very familiar and very involved 2 years ago with the original financing plan, which involved a substantial contribution of public funds to make this happen. There was $7 million from the Proposition 123 program from the state, which we were fortunate to receive. We we had a housing fund accumulated as a separate fund. I think it was about $1.5 million, if I recall right. That was allocated to this. In addition, we pledged 5 years of the linkage fee, which of course is devoted towards workforce housing. That's the purpose of the linkage fee. So there was a lot of public participation and a lot of public outreach that went around in course of evaluating and coming up with this overall plan. And it is fundamentally true that the plan cannot be instituted without the adoption of this amended PUD. There is no way in which to sell the upper 14 units that are planned to be sold without an amended PUD. So there is no way that the original plan could be effectuated without doing this. Now, it is true that there are options available. Mr. Peter Bach has presented one. And I think the Housing Authority looked at it. I think it was inconsistent with their mission because of the possible use of Skyview as an event center and a wedding destination. It was also of concern as to whether the proceeds would generate enough money to replace what was being sold as workforce housing. And I think that would be a significant problem. Now, I guess if they tripled their offering price, maybe not, but I don't think that's likely in the cards here. The reality is that without this PUD, the original financing plan cannot be accomplished. And the original financing plan was a very creative financing plan involving various levels of government, including the Housing Authority, the town, the state of Colorado, all of which were involved to make this a reality. It was not an easy thing to accomplish. And to suggest that there's technical defects in the PUD when it is clearly providing immense public benefit to not only maintain the 65 units below, but also the units that won't be sold above, that would be sold in the event Mr. Peter Bach's proposal went forward. I also want to mention about Ordinance 1125. And the town attorney has indicated that the vested rights statute allows this to go forward despite 1125. And I want you to remember that when 1125 was passed by the voters, there were two proposals. There was Proposal 300, which was adopted by the voters, and there was number 301, which was not adopted by the voters, which gives certain preferences to workforce housing in bonus density and height densities. So it's clear that the community likes workforce housing. The community believes that that's something we need to be doing as a community. And 1125, I think, was realistically, 1125 was envisioned to handle future developments. This was not a future development. This is a reuse and an adaptation of an existing development. If this were a new development, I have no question that 1125 would apply. But since it is simply a readaptation of an existing development, and I might note this has accommodation zoning, and as a result, yes, if they sell off units, yes, they can be available for getting licensure as vacation homes. And it is not subject to the cap in residential zoning because it's not residential zoning. It's accommodation zoning. It's permitted. It's what we intended to do when we put the cap, is to place vacation homes in accommodation type zoning. And that's what would happen if these units were sold and then used as vacation homes. So, I think that that's mostly what I want to say here. It seems to me that 1125 for sure would apply if this were a new PUD. And I know the Housing Authority actually has some properties that may require a PUD, and then we'll have to confront 1125 when that happens, perhaps. But with the vested rights statute, it's simply not appropriate to apply 1125 here. And that's the reality of it based upon attorney advice and really the overall purpose of what 1125 was about. It was about new development. This is a new development. So with that, I will vote in favor of this PUD. And I think it's in the best interests of our community. I think it provides substantial public benefits. beyond what would happen if we didn't adopt the PUD, because we would be unable to resell those units other than in bulk, maybe to Mr. Peterbach, which would provide less benefits to the housing authority and to the community than this proposal provides. So I will support this PUD motion.
We have this board, or the prior board before this election, we have turned down 2 applications for 1125. Trustee Eshelman.
So I keep hearing comments on, you know, this was agreed upon from the start. This was the plan from the start. I'm just curious, when this was first conceived or talked about with the town, and this might be a staff question here, did we make financial commitments, or did we say, yes, we'll support a PUD in these initial conversations, or no?
Trustee Eshelman, we did make financial commitments. We didn't and
Only-
couldn't make a commitment to approve a PUD in the future.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Good question.
So when I look at it from the PUD, besides all the other issues, and that looking at it from the PUD, is how is this a betterment for the neighborhood or the community? I tend to agree with Trustee Eigel that I don't feel like this is. I think we've got a mix of what's going to be potential year-round staff, and then these have the potential to be sold off and converted to VRBOs. So we're going to have that classic conflict of VRBOs, year-round staff that are year-round tenants that already goes on. And one thing that concerns me is we're going to leave it to the association to work out the parking issues if we still use the event center for events. And I see that as being a detriment to the community. I see it being a point of contention between year-round people and guests, and how to manage that. And so I'm going to keep it short and simple for those reasons. Among others, I won't be in favor of this.
Trustee Mears.
All right, so I appreciate all the work that the Estes Park Housing Authority has put into the applications, and I know that the initial applications were exceptionally detailed, more so than they need to be, and I appreciate all the thought and effort you guys have put into those. I was initially hesitant to support this on our last meeting, mostly from the administrative perspective. I was very unsure about the PUDs, and I am definitely committed to making the best choices for this town and want to make sure everything is done correctly. I have since discussed the administration details with the staff, and as well as the history of the project, and I'm definitely more clear, and I understand there are actually no administrative barriers to approving the PUDs. I do think that workforce housing is actually more beneficial to the community than accommodations. I think that is an improvement on use. I think enabling us to use that resource as a housing or workforce housing benefit is actually really beneficial to the town as a whole. I am conflicted on the use of Skyview, and so I just have a couple questions there. It does not look like creating this PUD would prevent the future sale of Skyview as an event center, except for the office hours, correct?
I believe that's correct.
Yeah, and so the complication becomes with parking, and so parking is kind of outlined in several different places throughout this, and the amount of parking limits the amount of occupancy, and it ranges in this document from, let's see, 45 spaces, 87 spaces, although during office hours it's 87 people, and during office hours it's 59 people, and non-office hours, there's another place where it says 97, but if the daycare is open, then it's 103 people during non-office hours and 65 people during office hours. However, there's storage containers there, so it's 97 people during non-office and 59 people during office hours. So obviously, you know, that's something that could be cleared up a little bit. I wonder what the viability of actually having this event facility, because it's still labeled so in this PUD, and using it as such as a resource for the community and as an income stream for the community. And I honestly think to have those together and figure out a way for those to work together with maybe parking off-site could be an asset to the community and actually increase the income for the property to make it even more self-sufficient or pay down that debt faster. I'm very interested in exploring that option, and it doesn't look like these PUDs prevent any of that from being explored. Is that correct?
I would agree.
Yep. Let's see. I had one more question. And what is the plan for the offices at Skyview? What is the temporary nature of those?
So we have moved, EPHA is relocated.
Okay.
And has terminated our lease in the US Bank building as we outgrew that space. So Skyview has now become our office space.
Great.
For a centralized office staff, including maintenance and inventory.
Oh.
I want to be clear, as Trustee Eigel mentioned, that site is not going to be our permanent home. It will be a temporary basis. How long that temporary status lasts, if that's 1, 3, 5 years, it could be multiple years until we can either find a more suitable space to our needs or purpose build something as part of another development that fits the Housing Authority's unique needs.
Yeah. And I thank you for defining that. And I just want to recognize that, that is a resource of the town, and we all want it to be used in a way that is most beneficial. And we understand that the temporary nature of the offices is needed right now, and that we'll still be planning for long-term beneficial use in the future, correct?
You have agreement from EPHA on those points.
All right, perfect. I just want to address a few things that Trustee Eigel said. As I said before, I do think that it's a better land, like the land use that it was before was basically accommodation, correct? And I don't see a big change from accommodation housing to being short-term rental. So in essence, us making a PUD to sell it for accommodations, while it would be ideal to keep that for workforce housing, I understand that that was part of the agreement in the initial plan to be financially sustainable. And I think it's very important that we stay financially responsible to the town. And so to sell those from accommodation to a PUD that's going to be a short-term rental, I really don't see a big change in use there. Let's see. In terms of deviations from the codes, those are already built into the actual landscape right now. So they're already buildings with no setbacks, loading space, the sidewalks, the increased density. They're already accommodations, which is essentially the same as STR permitted, and they already had parking elsewhere. I think that, this defined use of using it for workforce housing so that we can create a financial boon for that project is a pretty viable use for that property.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions from the trustees?
Yes. Sorry, I wasn't talking for a while, just blocked out. I want to clarify, maybe the attorney can weigh in to just clarify so I understand it clearly. When Trustee Marius characterized there's not a big change of housing or accommodations loss, whether it's used for workforce housing or accommodations, it's a kind of a similar trade. What have we quantified the impact of, I guess anybody that knows this, have we quantified the impact of the sales tax, the property tax loss? Because going to workforce housing, we do lose that tax revenue that I've heard about. There's some tax revenue that's lost on the property itself, as well as spending, as well as ancillary spending. Do we have that financial performance now? I don't remember seeing the evaluation by the Housing Authority. Is this a good use? What's the financial evaluation on how we sell this? So I disagree that this is not the best use of the property, or this is the best use. I think there's better, but I appear to stand alone on that. And I'm making that claim based on PUD information. So now I'm going to introduce, as everyone else has, other information about this. So I have a lot of questions about this project. And who could answer that question? What's the loss that we would quantify from this being a housing authority project versus a accommodations parcel?
Well, I have to ask, relating to that, Is this relevant to what the board
I
is
was
being
hoping that-
asked?
I was hoping you'd raise
Because we're supposed to base our decision on whether or not this PUD meets the requirements. Now, it's up to this board to approve or disapprove. We
Mayor, I
can go both
100% agree with you.
ways.
And
So,
by raising that question
Yeah.
in the way that I did, you have validated my concern that we have just had an hour conversation about aspects of this issue that are not specifically related to the PUD application. There have been many other topics that have been introduced here that are not germane to this conversation. If I was an attorney, I'd probably say mistrial.
yeah, and
I'm not.
I'd say that was true of our
Yeah.
first discussion. Our
Yeah.
second one was short. We just continued
Well,
to
this is the
today.
PUD hearing, and I think that we have gone outside the boundaries of what we should be talking about.
I agree.
Without the permission of the housing authority, we have to make a decision tonight.
Correct.
Now, the housing authority could say, we grant you permission to continue this and have this conversation with more information down the road. Or we can vote on it. And our yes vote will prevent us from any other use of that property other than selling pieces. There will be no conversation selling it as one unit. Is that our problem? No. That's the housing authority's responsibility. That's their business decision to make independently. But we are the accountability piece in this conversation. And that's probably why I'm pushing so hard, because once we approve this, we remove opportunities. If we deny this application, all we're doing is saying business as usual tomorrow. We can revisit a future conversation about anything you want to talk about. And that's why I'm going to vote against this resolution.
Town attorney, did you have a comment or not? You were reaching for something, either chocolate or the button.
Maybe it was chocolate, Mayor. I don't have anything
Okay.
additional. I think
All right.
what I might have said has been covered.
Thank you. Reports, statements, exhibits, and written communication presented will be accepted as part of the record. This public hearing is closed. I will consider a motion.
I'll move for the approval of Resolution 8726 with the inclusion of the conditions specified by the Planning Commission and the Community Development Department.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion from Trustee Lancaster, a second from Trustee Brown, and is there any discussion on the motion? I think we've made our points. We can vote. (8726) passes by a vote of 5-2. We will move on to our second public hearing, which is 8826. Planning Commission Item B, Resolution 8826, Fall River Village 2, Preliminary Plat, Owner Applicant, Estes Park Housing Authority. As stated on the first public hearing, we'll consider the information presented during the public hearing from the town staff, applicant, public comment, written comments received on the application. Has there been any ex parte communication from any member of the board? I would expect not, because you would have had to answer yes before. Any member of the board can ask questions concerning this application, which at any stage of the public hearing, which may be responded to at that time. This public hearing is open. We'll listen to the staff report.
Thank you, Mayor, Trustees. So as you're now well aware, this is a preliminary plat application for a 3.8 acre property, which contains 24 units as well as the event facility. Sarah, can you share that? The existing 24 units and event facility, sorry, I covered that. The eightplex is on Lot 1, which is the northwest corner. The duplex being the southeast corner, with the others, the townhome lots and the event facility, Lot 12. The application does comply with relevant standards and criteria. I will run through as the advantages of this application. The lots do meet minimum standards in the development code and/or with the now approved PUD. Similarly, setbacks comply with the development code or with the approved PUD. Density, no new units are proposed. Subdividing the property should have little to no impact on character of the area. Geologic and wildfire hazard areas. The property is outside all mapped hazard areas and would be subject to Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code should there be any exterior renovations. Utilities and services. Service providers did review the application and expressed no objections. Do want to touch briefly on some comments from the Water Division. There were initially concerns with shared water service lines that exist. Shared lines are not typically allowed to serve two different lots due to potential conflicts or complications with maintenance and billing. Lots 13 and 14 share a water meter and service line. The applicant will install a sub-meter to determine water usage for each of those two units. They will also dedicate easements to ensure appropriate access for maintenance, and these items have satisfied the Water Division's concerns. Proposed subdivision will not alter orientation of land uses. No new public improvements are proposed. Existing sidewalk through the property serves the site, and wildlife habitat's not applicable. Another item to address is building code issues. The subdivision of the property creates different building code requirements and occupancy classifications compared to how the buildings were originally constructed. That analysis determines some of the lots lack required fire separation in the attics, and 2 lots will require installation of a fire sprinkler system. Planning Commission recommended a condition of approval to address these items prior to recording of the subdivision plat. Since the application complies with relevant standards, no disadvantages are identified. Planning Commission did forward a recommendation of approval with the condition of addressing those building code items. The subdivision will have little to no impact on town finances or resources. Public interest, public notice was provided in accordance with development code requirements, and I believe 2 public comments were received on the application. Sample motion is provided for your reference, and that concludes my presentation.
Any other conditions that you didn't report in the staff report for approval?
No, sir.
All right. Applicant, any comments? Public comment, again, let me know how many folks are going to make public comment. I see 2 at least. That's good, then we'll stick with the standard 3 minutes. So you may come up. Yeah. If we had like 30 people wanting to make a comment, I'd have to subdivide 30 minutes or something in order to reasonably keep pace. Anyway, you're good.
Okay, now, this is a...
Please state your name.
My name's Dave Albee, and I live here in Estes Park.
Thank you.
And I assume that this is the 3.8 acre lot? Is that what?
The public comment section is not intended as a question-answer period, but you can state that.
Well, I didn't see it on the map, but I'm sorry. Okay. I'm going to make a proposal that we use that 3.8 acres lot between the Fall River Trail and the river as open space. And understand that the Housing Authority Department has done a survey, and 245 people have responded to the Housing Department survey, which is online, and the results show that they recommend that the community consider several decisions. One of them is the wildlife habitat, and this open space area is totally an open space area. It's a migrating path. It's the elk, sheep come down off of the mountainside down to that area and drink water, and the bears use it to go downtown for their activities. So that's a wildlife corridor. And then 270 of the people that responded want a bike path or trail. This is requested by the town people. And another 203 people of this wildlife study like the thing. So I'm saying that the people that had that responded to the survey, the wildlife area kind of covers all their concerns. And I think the open space in this area would actually enhance the value of the fish hatchery property, the original fish hatchery property. Everybody wants to have, it makes it a more desirable place to live. If you live across the street from open space.
And we're over time, actually. So.
Okay. So that's my request, is to put in a thing. And I totally, 88.9, I don't think that there's any other project that you can piggyback off and make the decision to approve.
Thank you. There was another public comment, I think. Yes.
Hello again, Christine Poppets, 650 Devon Drive. I'd like to address the sidewalks, pedestrian connections, and ADA access. It's in the packet that you were given before the meeting started, the one that's stapled, double-sided, item number 4. Per the packet for today's meeting, the applicant stated, quote, "The project has a sufficient sidewalk and trail network," end quote. The applicant also references 2 staircases connecting the upper and lower Fall River properties and states that the project has strong walkability to town center and surrounding amenities. My questions: where is the accessible ADA compliant pedestrian connection corresponding to the routes being described as providing sufficient pedestrian connectivity? Do staircases alone constitute sufficient pedestrian connectivity for individuals who cannot use stairs? Has staff evaluated a continuous accessible pedestrian connection from the development toward Farview and Wonderview Avenue? If the PUD is approved, the board may condition upon approval construction of a substantial contribution toward a continuous, safe, and accessible sidewalk or pedestrian connection from Farview to Wonderview. This is your chance to do it. Please note, trail connection in the packet, quote, "was previously not required for a private for-profit commercial enterprise," which the Housing Authority is not. If Estes Park wants long-term pedestrian connectivity, opportunities to connect, missing segments should be evaluated when significant development applications come before the town. What portion of this constitutes a new public benefit attributed to the amended PUD versus improvements or open spaces already associated with the existing Fall River PUD? Are these pedestrian connections available to the general public or primarily to Fall River residents and users? This distinction appears relevant to determining the extent of the public benefits under section 3.4D.6. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comments on this item? The applicant has an opportunity to speak. No comments to be made. We can see trustees. Do you have questions or comments on 8826?
Just, Mr. Albee, I appreciate your comments. I just want to clarify to when you're leaving here, this has nothing to do with the fish hatchery project. This is a different piece of property. It's not the fish hatchery project. We're dealing with Fall River Village, which is the downtown property. So, great comments about fish hatchery, but this isn't the fish hatchery project we're dealing with tonight.
I'm just saying it enhances that area.
Yeah, that's not the area we're talking about tonight. We're talking about a different parcel.
Okay, this 3.8 acres is not property.
No, it's not part of fish hatchery or that area at all.
And then we'll move. When that does come up, though, I hope you'll bring your comments.
Please
forward.
come back and talk about that.
All reports, statements, exhibits, and written communications presented will be accepted as part of the record. This public hearing is closed. We can take a motion.
I move to approve Resolution 8826, Fall River Village 2 preliminary plat.
I'll second.
Trustee Brown moved to approve 8826. Trustee Lancaster seconded. Any further discussion by the board on this? We'll vote. The 8826 passes 5-2. We will move on to public hearing number about 8926. So the next order of business will be the public hearing on Planning Commission Item C, Resolution 8926, Fall River Village 2 Final Plat. Owner applicant Estes Park Housing Authority. The Board of Trustees at this hearing shall consider information presented during the public hearing from the town staff, from the applicant, public comment, and written comments received on the application. I've asked the ex parte question twice. I don't expect, but let me know if there's a problem there. Any member of the board can ask questions at any stage of the public hearing. The public hearing is open. Mr. Hornbeck, you may give us the report on 8926.
The Development Code requires subdivisions to be reviewed first as a preliminary plat and then as a final plat. The preliminary and final plats are typically considered by town board at separate hearings. In the case of this application, with no new development, with no changes likely between the preliminary and final hearings, staff has scheduled the hearings back to back. However, unlike the PUD, there's no obligation for the board to act on both. So as the same review criteria applies to both applications, I have nothing further to add that wasn't already covered or in the packet. Happy to answer any questions.
Any other conditions for approval not in that report?
No, sir.
Applicant, any comments? No. Public comment? Does anyone in the audience want to make public comment? All right, we've got at least one.
I keep hearing people at Town Hall, Judy Smith, 661 Bighorn Drive. I keep hearing people at Town Hall say that the Estes Park population is against the Fall River PUD project. I am an Estes Park resident and citizen. I believe the Fall River proposals are very important to the economic sustainability of Estes Park. Workforce individuals are people like my own family, who live and work in the Estes Valley. We as a community are in need of workforce housing at multiple levels.
Thank you. Other public comment on 8926? Any rebuttal? Board of Trustees, any further questions or comments? All reports, statements, exhibits, and written communications presented will be accepted as part of the record. This public hearing is closed. I'll consider a motion.
I move for the approval of Resolution 89-26.
I'll second.
Mayor Pro Tem Hazelton proposed a motion to approve. Trustee Lancaster seconded. And is there any other discussion? We can vote. Whoops. And 8926 passes 5-2. Thank you, Mr. Hornbeck. And in fact, I think you're up for the next item. We'll move on to action items. Habitat for Humanity fee waiver request. And go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. The Habitat for Humanity received approval of the Raven subdivision in March of 2024. This included 5 single-family lots. Thus far, 2 building permits have been issued, with 1 home complete and another under construction. Habitat is requesting fee waivers for the building permits on all 5 lots. The total amount is approximately $19,000. However, the exact fees cannot be determined until a permit is received due to the valuation of the work determining the total of the permit fees. The 2 permits that have been issued totaled just over $7,000. Policy 402 establishes a policy for reduction of fees in support of community needs, including attainable housing. Requests greater than $3,000 are to be heard by the town board per that policy. There are a number of criteria for consideration. Criteria 1 and 2 are somewhat subjective, but staff view those as being met. Criteria 3 to 5 are more objective and have been satisfied. However, the request does not appear to be fully eligible for a fee waiver due to the stipulation that direct expenses from outsourcing are not eligible for fee waivers. The town's building division services are outsourced to Safe Built, a third party. Part of the town's contract states that 90% of the plan review and building permit fees are passed directly onto Safe Built, with the town retaining the remaining 10%. Advantages of waiving the fees. It would support construction of attainable housing. Disadvantages: waiving the fees that are direct expenses incurred in outsourcing appear in violation of Policy 402. The town would be obligated to pay Safe Built, to reimburse Safe Built for those fees for any waiver beyond 10%. As such, staff recommends the board approve a fee waiver of 10%. So as mentioned, the fee waiver of up to 10% would be a loss of town revenue. Any fee over 10% would create additional expenses, with the town being obligated to reimburse Safe Built. Public interest in this item appears low. Sample motions provided for your reference, and I believe the applicants have a presentation for you as well.
And the the advantage from a standpoint of whoever is going to be renting or purchasing these homes is they would be able to rent or purchase them. I think it's purchase actually for less because the waiver, or pardon me, the fee would not be included in a purchase price for. However, I'm trying to say that you know, they can lower the cost that they're selling it for because they don't have to pay the waiver, or at least the 10% that we're doing. Okay. You have additional comments before I
Just
ask
really
for
quickly,
public comment?
Good evening, Mayor and Trustee. Thank you for considering this request. Dave Emerson, I'm the Executive Director for Habitat for Humanity. We provide home ownership opportunities for those below 80% AMI. Just real briefly, our development costs, especially in a place like Estes Park, are anywhere between $450,000 and $500,000. We sell homes for $350,000, so we do have homes on Raven that are for sale, multiple homes, and so we are going through multiple applications at this point. We fill that gap in a lot of ways. We're very, very grateful for the trustees' support through the 6E funds. Scott and his team over at the Housing Authority have been very, very helpful. We bring in individual, corporate, and state and really national resources in to complement the local giving. So we'll have AmeriCorps up here building. We'll have other groups coming in and donating and so forth. But fee waivers are something that municipalities do use as a tool to keep that sales price low. We understand there's hard and soft costs, so we're just grateful for anything that this body can do to help defray that cost. Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Is there public comment on this item? I see none. Trustees, questions, comments? Trustee Eigel.
I think this is a great idea. I think this is the kind of thing that the town can support, and that's the whole point of the fee waiver. But I do think that we need to be respectful of our guidelines and go with the 10% and not create any cost to the town, but support it in that way. So I would make a motion in that direction. If there's any other comment, I'm happy to defer.
Trustee Eshelman.
I do have a question on this. I know in the past, I don't know if there's a fund that still exists that kind of offset water tap fees, obviously paid by the general fund because the utility can't reduce that. And I know in the past that's been used to help in a project like this. Does that account still exist? Is there money still in that account for these purposes?
That's a good memory, Trustee Eshelman. The town has traditionally carried about $14,000 in the legislative fund to fund fee waiver requests that have a direct financial cost to the town. That money comes directly from Platte River Power Authority as an economic development incentive. I do not believe that fund has been tapped in the past few years for this type of waiver. We have not received utility tap fee waiver requests for quite some time. So I do not believe that's built in here to cover the cost, the hard cost of the building permit. I don't think that's on the radar right now. This would be covered through the general fund, the contribution from the Community Development Department.
Sure. I was just looking at that as, you know, a way to give more than 10% potentially if that was spread out between all the units. My recollection, it used to be more than that, and I didn't think it was Platte River Power. It was town set aside funds, but.
So that money comes in as revenue to the general fund for those purposes, and we traditionally allocated it to this purpose. I'd have to go back and reconstruct the exact. For a while, it was increased to about 30,000. We had to make budget cuts a few years ago. It may have been just post-COVID, but there is not a separate fund other than that to fund fee waiver requests. I do believe there is $14,000 in there this year, though. If the board would like to consider a larger subsidy, there is money available that we could draw on to do so.
And you said that that really hasn't been tapped too much lately in the past couple, 2, 3 years?
I'd have to go back and look at the reports, but to my recollection, it has not been tapped recently.
Okay, all right. That would be something that I would be in favor of, more or less, to support the water taps paid by general fund instead of, it would alleviate the 402 issues, correct? As far as, we wouldn't have to worry about policy 402 in that regard.
Any fee waiver requests, I think there might be, we combined the fee waiver requests, you'll have to give me a second. Any fee waiver request does have to come through the town board, I believe. I don't believe that there is a administrative way for us to grant fee waivers.
Sure, I understand that. As an alternate proposal, that could not be done tonight, I'm assuming.
Yes, Trustee Eshelman, I'm trying to remember exactly what we did a few years ago because we made a number of changes to the fund you're talking about and fee waivers in general in 2023, I believe. I just pulled up a policy that I don't think existed before then. It's Finance Department Policy 603, utility fee amortization. I think that if I'm remembering correctly, we eliminated the fund that you're referencing and instead are focusing on amortization of utility fees, including tap fees, with the idea at the time, I believe, that if there was a need for financial support for workforce housing in particular, that could come from 6E funds rather than need to be a separate town fund. But I'm putting myself on the spot here when really, if we want to dive into that, the town staff should refresh our memories and bring that back to you.
Okay, all right, thanks.
All right, I don't see any other questions or comments. Do I have a motion?
Mayor, I'd move to approve a partial fee waiver for 10% of the building permit and the plan review fees for construction of single-family homes on the subject lots.
I'll second.
Trustee Eigel moved to approve this fee waiver request, the 10% that has been recommended to us by staff, and Trustee Mira seconded. Any other discussion? We'll vote. Approved 7-0. Town Attorney, I know we modified the agenda and we put the rest of that last study session item for discussion there. Is there any legal way I can move the police department item ahead on the EPHA Board of Commissioners appointment?
Yes, Mayor. The board can decide to change the agenda at this point if the board would like.
Board, I would like to suggest that we do the police department take-home vehicle benefit program first, and then the Board of, the EPHA Board of Commissioners appointment. Is there any disagreement to that? All right, well, let's go ahead and do it. We'll talk about the expansion of the police department take-home vehicle benefit program. And I think Chief Stewart, you are going to be presenting.
Mayor, I'm happy to introduce this one. This is an unusual one, and as for why it's coming forward to you. As you all know, within your policy governance, you reserve certain rights relative to issues that may be of high public interest. Made a judgment call. I assume this might be one of them that you all would want to have more visibility on. It's a transparency decision to bring this in front of the board. We do have the ability to fund this year with savings that we'll talk about briefly relative to operational efficiencies in the police department, combined with revenue from the program and some savings in other areas. That said, we don't want to create a structural change that the board would not support in future budget cycles. So what we are planning on doing, unless we hear to the contrary tonight from the town board, is moving forward with the implementation of this plan. It would be rolled into the 2027 budget cycle. But
And
that is
there's-
why it is before you tonight, and happy to answer any questions you might have procedurally about why that is in front of you. Otherwise, I'll
And
turn it
there's
over.
no action to be
Correct,
taken
there's
by
no
the board.
action,
This,
staff will listen, and if there is anything that gives us pause, we will kick it to a future budget discussion.
all right.
Do I need to do anything to pull that presentation from mine? I apologize. Thank you. Okay, thank you. I got you. Okay, thank you. Good evening. The reason I'm before you tonight is the unfortunate reality is we've been unsuccessful in recruiting the officers this community deserves. Furthermore, we continue to lose officers to other departments, and we've been forced to take a hard look at the areas we're failing. However, I can say that addressing our recruiting and retention obstacles is currently my utmost priority. I have no doubt on the impact it has on public safety, and through a lot of work, our staff has identified that the take-home vehicle package is one of the areas where we could definitely make improvements. To kind of punctuate that, we've had no new officers that have been successfully hired and made it through our training and program to meet our standards since April of '25, which is a hard thing to tell you. So in looking at and demonstrating this whole need to take a look at our vehicle program or take-home vehicle program, there are 16 agencies up on that board there, one of them obviously being us. Of those other 15, we're second from the bottom when it comes to comparing take-home vehicle programs and the benefit that provides. The only person that, the only agency that we do better than is CSU, and that's because of the state budgetary cuts. They had to remove their whole program, and it did have a major impact on their staffing. You will see in there a lot of those agencies, and you'll also see these are agencies we do compete with. We're competing with them to recruit, and we're competing with them for stealing our officers away, to put it bluntly. You'll see that a lot of them have 20, 25, even as far as 60-mile radiuses. There's even one in there. There's no limit at all on how far you can take your car home. Larimer County obviously has over 6,500 square miles they can go. So we're up against that, and for some perspective with our radius in that R3 boundary, Highway 34, we can go about 6 miles down 34, about 11 down 36, and about 13 miles down 7. So that 6 to 13 mile radius is competing with 50s, 25s, unlimiteds. Just to give you some perspective on that situation with what we're up against. The benefits to expanding our take-home program, first and foremost, it is this recruiting and retention piece that I've been talking about the most. It is simply the labor market that we're in right now, and this is something that's very hard for us to be competitive in. However, and to a much lesser extent, there's a lot of value in emergency preparedness. A lot of the things I've been through in my career, from floods, fires, natural disasters, some pretty major tactical incidents, I feel pretty strongly and confident when I say we probably wouldn't have had the success we did in those had we not been able to push the big button and get everyone coming, lights and sirens, to help getting resources at that problem. Mutual aid and an increased visible police presence are also some benefits in this, but again, I'll go back to the primary benefit of all this is recruiting and retention the officers that this community deserves. What we have before us tonight and I want to talk about is expansion of our current program. There on your left, we have what we're proposing to be no change for those officers that live in the school district, our current program. We don't want to change that at all. We do recognize and we are very supportive of the fact that the more closer our officers can get to town, the more of a benefit is the town. And for that reason, we don't want to touch that. We want it to continue to be a no-charge take-home car area, just what we currently have now, and permitted off-duty use like we have now. What we'd like to expand is to allow officers living beyond the school district to be able to participate in a take-home car program. We realize this would take officer investment in that community cost, mileage verification on our end to make sure everything's the way it needs to be with that, and then also being very, making sure that that expanded program would not allow for personal use. This is just to get to and from work, whether that be a training or mostly the duties up here. Another thing that didn't make that slide that I want to point out is we also want to implement this only after an officer has been off their probationary period for 1 year to make sure that they're fully vested in this town. What we are proposing is a 3-tiered employee cost share. So if you're in the 0 to 10 mile range, that's $15 comes out of your bi-weekly check. 11 to 20 is 25, and 21 to 30 out of the 21 to 30 is $35 out of your bi-weekly contribution. When we did this study, we took the 10 officers that we had at the time to see what that would look like for us, that were living out of the school district's footprint, and that came up to 2 at the 25 rate and 8 at the 35. So this projection for us put us at just under $8,600 as an estimated annual contribution that the officers would be putting back into this endeavor. The question is, what does it cost the town? Numbers that we received through great cooperation with our internal services division and fleet, don't worry, we weren't cooking the numbers for ourselves, we got them from them, was that we'd be looking at about $13,000, just under $14,000 in fuel, $7,200 repair and maintenance that would increase just from the wear and tear. And then the vehicle replacement fund increase would be about $6,320 to account for that additional use as well. Something you're going to hear me talk a lot about through this presentation is that trying to put this together, the last thing I wanted to come back to you and say, we got it wrong, we got it horribly wrong. So every time we came up with projections and numbers, if it was on the scale of a fulcrum, we came up with a number that was in the best light, most favorable to the town, so that we knew we wouldn't be doing the town wrong in us getting our program where it needed to be competitive. For example, down there at the bottom, we went with a suggested mile per gallon for our projections at 20. When we took that area around Waltonia and Drake, that's the school district border, and went down into Loveland and then back up with one of our modern hybrids, we actually got a little over double that mileage. Just again, to show you how hard we try to make sure these numbers are the way that's most favorable to the town in case something isn't correct. And I'll talk about that more throughout all this. But if this costs us a little over $27,000 and the officers are putting in a little over $8,500, where's that other $19,000, the $18,907 coming from? Very proud to tell you that we went into this knowing this needed to be cost neutral to the town. I'm also very proud to tell you over the last 2.5 years, we've made a lot of fiscal efficiencies within the police department. One of those was putting us aligned with a lot of best practices, but also it had a fiscal benefit of $13,234 of going away from cell phone stipends to town-issued phones. That saved us some money. That program's already been implemented a couple years ago. We're already seeing the benefits of that program. But one of the nice things that's a consequence of implementing this program would be behind you all right now, as you're undoubtedly aware, we have a lot of police cars just sitting there in one of the most valuable real estate plots in Larimer County, to be frank. Getting those cars out of here, put it bluntly, and they're now, when they're not being used, they're in an officer's driveway, would allow us to give 10 spaces back to the town. Working with parking services, they have a formula for what those spaces revenue generate during the paid parking season, and that alone is $11,685 that we could be able to make the most out of that. The one thing I would like to point out is that $11,685 is a great number, and I believe in it based on what our parking services folks tell us. But what we'll never know is what the calculator in the sky tabulates from those 10 spots year-round, especially during paid parking season, when those are visitors coming into town with 2, 3, 4 people in the car, and they're patronizing our businesses, they're going to our restaurants, and they're further contributing to our economy. So that is a qualitative piece in this that we couldn't quantify, but I think is worth bringing up. So for us, how does that math work? A little over 27 to implement this, a little over 13 the phone savings, 11,600-ish for the parking revenue, and then our officers contributing that 8,580. That's 33,499 is what we're projecting. That actually puts us up as a benefit to the town for about $6,000. We were very intentional in wanting to go over, because again, the last thing I want to do is come back before you and say, hey, thanks for letting me try that. I was way wrong and it's costing us tons of money. I don't want to do that. We're very proud of the progress we've made with the finances of the PD, and we want to stay on that track. The other thing that bonus, that surplus of 6 does for us is it gives us some breathing room with fluctuating fuel prices. The break-even point, if you're wondering on that, is when gas gets to $5.08 a gallon is when we lose that 6,012. And please keep in mind, when you drive by a fuel station and you see that it's at 5.02 or whatever, that's commercial prices with all the extra taxes that Uncle Sam has taken out of there. We have a contractual rate that we go through with Larimer County and the school district that is significantly less, and we don't have to pay tax on it. So a lot of the calculations we did for all this was when it was at $3.65 a gallon, which I think might still be our contracted rate, but that will fluctuate. That's gas. That's how it works. I just wanted to be transparent with you on that again, we tried pushing all these projections on the side where we would be getting what we need from this program with also being very fiscally responsible to the town. So why does this make sense? In addition to using conservative numbers I've been talking about, we do know this needs to be reviewed annually. We need to make sure it continues to make sense. It continues to make sense for officers that are contributing to it, and it continues to make sense for a town. And I, as the police chief, making sure that it's continuing to make sense as a recruiting and retention tool. The culture and the labor market of law enforcement has shifted dramatically throughout my career. Who knows what Generation Beta is going to look like, right? But it's going to be our responsibility to keep reviewing this. Part of that is the recognition that we might need to be looking at those tiers also. And then lastly, that eligibility piece. And with that, as I already discussed, making sure we're only offering things for officers who are off probation. A couple other things worth mentioning is internal services for the town and fleet have done a really nice job implementing the Ford telematics program, which gives us a lot of insight into what our vehicles are doing. And that will help us further model and take a look at these mileage concerns. And then also every year that happens, we have one less ICE internal combustion engine and one more hybrid, which is going to continue to move us forward in the right direction with this while keeping us competitive in our labor market. So for an approximately cost-neutral implementation, the police department gains a stronger recruiting, stronger retention, faster emergency callback, improved regional mutual aid readiness, greater marked patrol presence, the benefit of those 10 parking spaces, both in the revenue they can generate for parking services, but also hopefully what would be increased economic impact to the town, and the mobile phone price that we've already implemented into this. What I'm asking of the town and the community is for their support to move forward with this initiative so that we can make sure that we're keeping the quality officers that we have and we can recruit the quality officers that we need. There'd be no change to the residency requirements for those that are in the school district and all the benefits that come with it. Implementation of those mileage tiers, our commitment to be reviewing the plan's viability. Further on in this, I know it's in your packet, I'd be happy to discuss it, but I'm wondering how much of it might not just come up in discussion questions you have for me, would be the annexes and all the metrics and data we put into making sure these were numbers that I could do my best to stand behind and stand before you and not waffle on. So with that, would you like me to go through the appendixes or can I answer questions?
Yeah, we'll open it up to questions and comments. My comments, 2 words, I like.
Thank you.
Does this mean 1 vehicle, 1 officer?
Yes, sir, and we have that now.
Do we need more vehicles or?
We're short 1 right now. It's actually one of my decision packages for the year.
Short 1 officer or 1 vehicle?
Well, we're short many officers. We're short 1 vehicle to do FTEs to vehicles. And it just feels like, and I'll let the town administrator correct me anytime we want, but it sounds like several years ago, we might have added officers but not accounted for an additional car. But we were short 3 vehicles a year and a half ago. Last year through the budget, we were able to get 2 of those vehicles built. So we're just technically short one vehicle right now, and it is something we're trying to get with this year's budget. So out of all the vehicles, we're just short one, and I'm short a lot more officers than that anyways.
Well, I'm sure you need more vehicles and officers to switch out for maintenance and PMs and that kind of stuff too.
Yes, however, something we've discussed with our leadership and our supervisors is that to make this happen, we know we're gonna have to have car partner program. In that if your vehicle goes in for maintenance, you're gonna have to go with your kind of accountability buddy to make sure that you're gonna share that car at that time. It's so important to get this across the line for me that I didn't want that issue to keep us from getting there. So that's kind of the way we're trying to address it at this point, should this be successful with the board and the town administrator.
Well, one thing you didn't mention, and I was there when we implemented this at the sheriff's department.
Yes, sir.
It was under Sheriff Shockley, I think. It was a while back.
Yeah.
The fleet department noticed the deputies were taking better care of the vehicles.
Yes, sir.
Just because they had some ownership in them, if they're driving them to and back and forth, and it's kind of a hard to measure, but the fleet guys said it did make a difference, and then they were just basically using a pool car when they came to work.
I couldn't agree with you more. And the other thing you see is cops are a funny breed, right? They'll go buy all the widgets, and if it's got black Velcro on it, we'll go buy it, right? But a lot of what that means is you end up with extra medical gear in your car, end up with extra active violence gear in your car, because you're like, I don't mind going and spending that money on it to make myself and my community safer, but I don't know what my buddy's gonna do with that later tonight, right? So there's a lot of benefits to that. Yes, sir.
Mayor Hall, Trustee Lancaster, just to confirm that we have had a one car, one officer policy for as long as I've been here. It is a common, especially in a small to mid-size police department. The industry data tells us that the wear and tear on the cars is less, not only because people have more accountability, but also because you're idling the cars less because you have less people on shift at any given time. If you have half the number of cars and they're always running, always idling, you see more wear and tear on the vehicles. There is a point at which that shifts over and it becomes less cost effective, but it's north of where we are now. I've heard in finance circles that it's around 40 to 50 cars where you turn over and it's more expensive. So if you're city and county of Denver, it's more expensive to have one car, one officer. At where we are now, the industry data tells us that it is less expensive and better asset management to have one car, one officer. And that is not connected to this. That has been the town's policy. We did get out of sync there somehow, somewhere, at some point in the past. There is a package to rectify that this year. It hasn't become an issue because, as you've heard Chief Stewart mention, we have not been fully staffed. The last time I believe we had all of the seats filled, but that included officers in field training, was 2020. So it has been quite some time since we've had enough officers that are full bore officers, not on probation, to actually have realized that, oh, we don't have enough vehicles for these officers.
Thanks. I also appreciate, just as a side note, the incremental move toward more hybrids. I know there'll come a time where dependability and price will allow us to even step into the complete electric market, but I understand the reasons for the step up. Trustee Eshelman.
I support this too. I'm just kind of curious. Right now, it sounds like you rotate out every 100,000 is kind of, or is it more time-based?
I really wish Director Featherston was here to correct me on this. I believe what we're wanting to move to is 7 years, 100,000. But right now, and again, this is a symptom, and I'm going to speak anecdotally, so please give me that. When I first got here, the vehicle I inherited from the previous chief, I think it was 8 years old, and when I turned it in, it had 36 or 37,000 miles on it. It's because the miles that we put on it in town here, they don't accumulate, so they generally go much, much, much deeper into their years than their mileage. And that's very foreign from what I'm used to.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's 100 we're wanting to go to, with the recognition that we might have to go from 8 years to 7, but if I stand corrected on that, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just curious with the take-home program, how much that was going to be shortened, but that can be a question for later, I guess.
Yeah, I think I think it is 100, and if I remember correctly, we kind of accepted we're going to have to go from 8 years to 7, which is why there's a VRF component in that officer contribution.
Thanks.
Mayor Pro Tem?
No questions, just really thorough presentation. Thanks for case studies and all the different numbers. It was really helpful to see. Very supportive of it. I don't see any issue with us moving forward on this. My only thought is certainly with, the additional drive, presumably most of this is canyon driving, right? That the likelihood of, well, I mean, you could look at it both sides. That one side is you've got an officer vehicle going up and down those canyons a lot more, which tends to whip people into shape when they see slow them down or keep them from passing on double yellows. And then the other flip side is, increases likelihood of some sort of accident or, something like that too. So I'm sure that's already been totally thought of, but it's on my brain.
I totally agree with you on all accounts. And when I brought this up, that I was something I was be pursuing at a monthly chiefs and CEOs of law enforcement meeting, I can tell you the state troop captain and the sheriff were very pleased to hear there might be more marked presence in the canyons, and that's something we do hope. We take a lot of pride in the safety we bring to this town, and if it's just a little bit outside of the limits, that's fine with me, though I understand there can be some concerns with that.
No, I'm supportive of it. Thank you.
I just wanted to respond to Trustee Eshelman's question. You're correct. Your recollection is correct. We're looking at 7 years and 100,000 miles. In general, though, there are other factors to consider. Telematics is really going to help us understand the impacts of idling time, maintenance costs. Sometimes you get a car that just wasn't built the same way as another one, but that's generally what we're looking at. And insurance is not really a factor. We pay based on the value of the vehicles and the number of vehicles we buy, not on the mileage.
Thank you, sir.
Town Administrator and Chief, do you need additional input?
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. All right.
Thank you very
Thanks much. Thanks, all the folks in blue, although it kind of looks like black from here, but I don't have my glasses on, but thank you. Let's move on to the Estes Park Housing Authority Board of Commissioners. This is a discussion item also. And Travis, are you introducing that one, or is that the town clerk?
Mayor, I'm happy to introduce this one. This is primarily a town board discussion. We are here tonight because you requested this discussion prior to interviewing the 14 applicants you have for the Estes Park Housing Authority Board of Commissioners. Staff is happy to answer any questions you might have, but this is intended and was called by the board for a board discussion relative to how that Housing Authority Board is going to be constituted and operate moving forward.
And we still have 14 applicants, right?
Yes, Mayor, we have, caveat, I don't know, yep. Looking at Town Clerk Williamson, who's nodding vigorously at me. We still have 14 applicants. They have been informed that this meeting was taking place, and that was the reason for the delay, that it was not a cause of the quality of the applications or anything of that matter. So they are anticipating contact after this meeting one way or the other.
Yeah, and we know from some past conversations that, prior to having the Housing Authority and the board, the town board, I believe, served as the de facto housing authority. And it's been, 25 years since the Housing Authority was created? When was it created? Sometime early in this millennium?
1993, I believe, Mayor.
1993, oh, wow. So 30-plus years we've actually had that. We've been educated on a few things along the way, including that we could only, in the current structure, appoint one town board member as a voting member to that board. I believe that is right now a fact. But anyway, opening it for discussion. Trustee Eshelman, launch us.
Just wondering with 2 agenda items, should we vote to extend past 10 o'clock since it's? Okay. Oh, we can. Okay.
Continue the other one. But
Maybe we can get done before 10. Yeah. Let's be efficient here. Okay, Trustee Brown.
I'll move to approve. We extend beyond 10 o'clock.
I'll second that. we can vote. Nobody has a poker face tonight, you know? Oh, joy. 5-2 in favor of extending. Continue the discussion now. Let's hear what everybody wants to say about this.
Well, maybe, if it's okay, Mr. Mayor, I can start out since I'm liaison to this group and have to be doing the interviews. There really there's two issues here that need to be discussed, and I think one can be put off, but one is the appointment process, but really is about the makeup of the APHA board, and that's really the question, I think. We have put off the interviews because there was some discussion about changing the makeup of the board, and there was no reason to interview people if we're going to do something different, so that's the meat of it. The other issue, and we don't have to address this tonight, but I would like to maybe put it on maybe as a study session, is we're pretty loosey-goosey about how we do interviews for committees and things, and it's kind of up to the liaison of whether they include the staff, whether they include somebody, like in this case, Mr. Moulton, they include the executive director of the organizations. Do they bring in other people to sit in on the interviews? Do they not allow them to interview? Do they get input from them? There's not a consistency there. And I had somebody else contact me this week, not in regards to this, but in regards to other boards, saying, you really don't know. It kind of goes to the discretion of, in most cases, the liaison. And the liaison gets someone else to work with them, and then those two trustees kind of decide who gets to sit in, who gets input, who doesn't, how we should do that, and it's not very consistent. So I would like to suggest, just to start this off, that at some point we have a discussion of formalizing how we interview board members, how we do the interview, who sits in on them, and what is the role of an executive director in an interview, so that we have some consistency, because it's kind of all over the board, and it has caused problems in the past, with at least with the perception of the public. And then the other one we need to talk about, it was probably the meat of this, is not the process for the appointment, but what's the makeup of this board? Does this board want to change it? Do we want to do something different? And then once we know that, because Mark and I are on the committee to appointment, there's no way we can do interviews and appoint it when we don't know what kind of a board we're appointing them to. So we need to fix that first, and then we can talk about how we're going to do it. So those were the two issues that can kind of kick this off. And did you want to comment on the?
Mayor Trustee Lancaster, only insofar as I would envision the recruitment and selection and interview process for town appointments to be part of the broader Policy 102 rewrite. So I think you're dead on, and we can wrap that into that conversation where we're separating out the liaison piece and narrowing down 102 to exclusively focus on interview, selection, and appointment for town board appointments in that policy. So I can wrap that into that overall conversation, and that'll come back to the board pursuant to the last study session we had on that. That does not help you with the second item. I don't have anything to offer there.
Trustee Eigel.
You know, I was involved in the conversation to have the conversation about how the housing authority is structured. So I feel like I want to weigh in a little bit. Now, just in the last several months, we've had the opportunity to meet with the Housing Authority Board in a joint study session. I think that they said during that meeting it was the first time we had met together as a board. The town board used to be the Housing Authority Board from 93 to 2000. And then there was an ordinance that changed that, and the ordinance, instead of having the town board be the Housing Authority Board, we changed to an appointed board. And in that system, the system we're currently in, we can only have one town board representative on the board. And the legislature gives us two options on how the town board elects to establish the Housing Authority Board. So we're in one of those. What is the other option?
Trustee Eigel, the other option is for the board itself to be the board of the housing authority.
So we can do one or the other, but not a hybrid. Not 3 board members and 3 appointed members. It would be, understanding of it's one or the other.
Generally correct, yes. We can't say.
Attorneys
three-
always say words like that, like generally.
It's pretty clear that if we're using an appointment system, that we can't have 3 town board members on the Housing Authority Board in addition to, say, 4 Housing Authority Board members. We can't hybridize it that way.
Right.
If the town board wanted to transition to town board, the town board being the board of the Housing Authority, then there might be a transition period of some sort. We could discuss that if we get there.
Well, I think it's a reasonable conversation to have and responsive really to the community. There's a lot of interest in the Housing Authority. The Housing Authority is busy. They're active. They are also in a different position than they were since 2000. And now there's 60 funding. There's a lot of activity with the Housing Authority. There are other issues before us. And for me, coming out of the study session, I had a sense of we're not any closer after this meeting. It felt like there was a communication failure and we weren't understanding each other well. And I've spoken before in public meetings about the sense that the Housing Authority asserted their independence and they can make their own decisions. And that was hard to hear because I think independence and accountability are 2 different things. And I think you can be independent and still be accountable, but it doesn't feel like we have that. And so I would advocate for a change in the structure, or at least an evaluation of the structure to how we're doing that. So I guess that would probably be a middle ground for me in looking at this. Much of this is in response for me to community input or my own experience working with the Housing Authority, communicating and seeing how things have evolved and wanting to provide the best governance, because I think that board has to provide governance.
Do you have suggestions for staff if they were trying to craft a?
Yeah, I think that it would be reasonable to ask our staff to, well, first we have to decide what we're going to do about appointments. Are we going to appoint 3 more people to the existing system? Or are we going to pause that and take a look at how that structure is moving forward? And that would, perhaps allow the community to wait. This is a community's board. This is a community's town board. This is the community's money. And the money has really changed and the housing situation has changed. The communication has not followed. So I think we have that responsibility, the community, to hear what the sentiment is on this. If we can pause the process, I don't believe we're going to run into a quorum issue or decision-making authority with the Housing Authority Board. Would that be accurate?
I think if they lost 1 more member, you wouldn't have a quorum.
And in that circumstance, what happens?
Well, Trustee Eigel, if there's no quorum, then anybody can't make a decision. I would defer to the Housing Authority on their interpretation of the statute as to whether they think they would have a quorum in that situation. Because I don't know that the statute is clear enough that I should be making that determination for them.
And I'm asking you as a town board decision and as really the piece that seems to be a failure in this or an opportunity for improvement I've learned is that accountability piece, because I've heard the accountability goes through the town board. That can be a couple years with a term. You appoint someone that's a couple years. So it's not an effective day-to-day accountability lever. And I think we can do better. So that's the premise for my raising this issue. Looking for, I guess, a little bit of time for further consideration on it.
Well, if we were to proceed with the process as usual, fill the board, have a full board, if we were able to find within those 14 candidates, the ones to fill the board, we can still proceed separately from that and after that with how do we want to arrange this in the future? Yeah, it wouldn't
Yeah,
prevent us
it
from
doesn't,
doing
for me, it
that.
doesn't have to do with the people, the individuals. It has to do with the higher level governance of the housing authority, and is the board effective in its current form? And I think there have been some challenges in its current form in relationship with the community. So that's where this is coming from.
Although assigning 3 members chosen by or recommended by the interview committee and approved by the board, 3 members is a pretty substantial change to the board, and the possibility that we could appoint one of this board to it as part of that 3.
Yeah, I think you could argue that for today's circumstance.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think in longer terms, Mayor, of
Yeah.
what is in 5 years, what's in
Uh,
longer term.
well,
I'll let it go.
Yeah, let's see, let the others weigh in, and Trustee Eshel.
I would say that I felt similar in that joint meeting that we had. I felt like it brought us further apart rather than closer together, and I think we should be working much closer together as a unit, especially if we're accountable ultimately for that. I do feel like we need to figure out a better way to work together. I know Frank brought up in the past, the accountability side of, not being an elected board. Where's your accountability in that? And that if we're ultimately the accountable party for that, should more discussions take place? It's just my thought there.
Trustee Brown.
So I come at this from a slightly different angle because I had been a board member of the Housing Authority until I got elected to this board. And I know at that time it was offered that I could stay on as a board member or I could be a liaison. And at the time we were looking, and we still are looking at some potential development opportunities that will need to go through this board for approval. And it just seemed to me that there was too much of a conflict of interest to be an actual board member on the Housing Authority and also be a board member here. I think it presents some practical problems that I just don't think we're gaining much by adding a town board member compared to having liaison. And it's, to the extent there's communication and accountability, the Housing Authority comes to us with great regularity about various things. Maybe not as much as Carly does, maybe with childcare, but they're here a lot, and I just feel like they have public meetings. Anyone can attend them. I do wish that they were streamed, and so you may want to look at that as a possibility down the road so people can watch them remotely. But that there's quite a bit of an accountability as it stands because it's a public meeting, anyone can attend, and because in the end, we have quite a hammer by having control of the 6C funds that go their way. So if we get unhappy with something, that's our ultimate hammer anyway, and it's the ultimate accountability issue. So I personally think that there's some real benefits in having it independent from our town board, although we should still appoint the members, I think. That there is at least some accountability to us relating to our appointment of the members.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that we hold accountability by who we appoint. And I'd prefer to keep the process as is. I'd like to move forward with the 14 applicants. And I think, we're talking about community feedback that we're hearing about, housing authority activities and behavior and opportunities. I think having 14 people apply gives us direct representation from community members who are tuned in. And I think, yes, we are elected officials who are, can be held accountable. And that is part of the process of us appointing those seats. And I think this is part of our qualifying process. And I say us, you know, it's trustees Lancaster and Eichel in this circumstance, but this could be a great topic for the interviews, identifying our desire to see good board governance and increased communication and, you know, that we'd like to see, you know, these kinds of things coming from our board appointees. But I think if we're talking about having community feedback represented well in the Housing Authority and direct response from our community, I think having 14 applicants is a great start to that. So I have no desire, I mean, I know we're talking about different layers of this conversation. For where we are right now, I'd like to see interviews move forward for those applicants, get those seats filled. There's a lot happening with the Housing Authority. I don't want us to hold back. If the board does want to continue that next layer of board makeup, certainly we can continue to have that conversation. I don't have any interest in changing that at this point.
Trustee Mears.
As a new trustee, it's been an adventure in getting to know, you know, the Housing Authority and how that relationship works. And I still struggle with some lack of transparency between understanding what's going on with the Housing Authority and what's going on with our board, or not really with our board, but the interaction. And, you know, I do think it's probably worth the pause to understand if that relationship could be improved or even just clarify that relationship and what's going on. And I don't think it means that we can't move forward, but I think, you know, a little deeper insight into how we could facilitate easing that conversation between the two groups and making it more a cohesive flow instead of just sort of a black bag sometimes.
I pretty much follow along with Mayor Pro Tem indicated. I would proceed with filling from the 14. I was amazed that we got 14 applicants. I thought that was a wonderful thing. We often struggle to get one or two for these different boards. We get 0 sometimes. That's why we don't even have some boards assembled that we need for different things like the Board of Appeals. So I would move forward, but that doesn't bar us from having further discussions down the line about whether we would want to change the makeup of that in the long run. That can happen anytime. As far as relationship, you know, to me, that meeting, the joint meeting, it's like the first session of psychotherapy, you know? Yeah, get stuff out in the open, and it gives us a chance to work on it, and we're working on it. There's been more discussion about this in the last couple of months than probably for years before. So it's good. Open that up. Expose if there are sore spots and problem spots. Let's work on it. Let's talk. Find the conversational ways that we can have those discussions. Do trustees need to meet one-on-one with board members from the Housing Authority Board, or do we need to do quarterly joint meetings, or every 4 months or whatever? Let's find paths to keep communication going. Once you've opened it up, let's find that healing path. Anyway, Trustee Lancaster.
So I introduced it, but I didn't make my comments. I did have one question for the attorney. Are the length of the terms defined in statute? Do you know? Put you on the spot.
Give me a moment, Trustee
Okay.
Lancaster, let me double check.
All right, I'll ask some other questions while you look that up, your magic box there. I think there are concerns maybe about transparency and some accountability issues. I don't have a lot of that after I was liaison, and then I wasn't the liaison, and then I came back to be liaison. I think it's a fairly well-functioning board. But if there are concerns about that, rather than throwing out the baby with the bathwater, let's address the concerns and maybe some governance training of what is the role of a board. I mean, there are some things, you know, I've made some comments as a liaison, I'm pretty quiet about it, but things like the delays in the audit. Now, there were a lot of other things that caused that beyond the part of staff. I would have liked to have seen the board take their leadership role a little stronger and probably push staff of why aren't we getting this audit done? That's one of the fiduciary responsibilities they have. And they were kind of soft pedaled that. There might have been reasons for that, but that's just an example of where the board may not have been fulfilling their fiduciary duties. But governance is a strange thing, and a lot of people don't understand what their role is on a governing board. And they're not the CEO. The CEO has certain responsibilities, but there are responsibilities that the board has, and I'm not sure they get that kind of training. I think we can address some of that and address some of those needs and address the problems without throwing out the whole function. We can certainly look at that later. I do go back and forth about this idea of decision-making independent bodies that aren't elected, but they're out there, and some of them are for good reason. I worked for years with the Board of Health. The Board of Health is appointed by the Board of County Commissioners, but by purpose, the legislature set their terms at longer than any one commissioner so that they can't be influenced politically. And the way things have been the last few years, I think it's a good thing Board of Health have some political independence. And commissioners can only remove a member of the Board of Health for extreme cause. I think there's some advantage to that political independence. I think with the amount of money we spent on the Housing Authority and the impact in the community, I think some political independence is good. When we had our joint meeting, I think some of you might remember, we weren't going to have a joint meeting at first. We were going to talk about attitudes. We were going to tell the Housing Authority to come into one of our meetings to talk to us. And I opposed that. I said, no, we are two different independent bodies, and I respect that independence. And I asked for it to be a joint meeting between the two bodies. And I think it was more effective that way. I think there's some advantage to them having some independence. I also think that they have some expertise in a specialized need that we don't have as a board. This would just be one more function thrown on this body. We wouldn't have the expertise. When we appoint the board, we can look at things. What are the needs? Do they need somebody who's experienced in mortgage and in finance? Do you need somebody who's in banking? Do you need somebody who understands federal financing? We need somebody who represents somebody who lives in one of the houses. We don't have that representation here. We're gonna look. Sometimes you do need to look at things at the 5,000-foot level and not the 30,000. I think we can tighten up on how we look at things on the 30,000-foot level and our relationship with them. I think we can help them do better governance. I'd be willing to help them with that. Something I'm passionate about is governance and how that works. So, there are other ones, the library board, Visit Estes Park, other ones that have independence, but they're not elected. Northern Colorado Water, that's always been a sore one for me. It's not even picked by elected people, it's picked by judges, but they have a taxing entity. I don't mind looking at it again, but I would say maybe what we want to do is work with the chair and the board, do some discussion about what some of the issues are, how can we address those issues, what can we do to address it without throwing out the whole thing, and do some governance training and developing those skills, both frankly with the CEO and the board, without throwing out the whole thing. And then we can look at if we need to change it later on, but not so much at this point. I do see Trustee Brown's issue with the conflict of interest. There's so many crossovers. Even as liaison, I spent part of the meeting out in the hallway on Wednesday. I didn't mention that because they were talking about things that I really shouldn't hear as a trustee, but that board needs to discuss. If we were the board, that put us in a weird position of having to make a quasi-judicial decision, yet also making a tactical decision about a development that's ours. So I think having that separation is good, and we can move ahead. But we could look at it further. I don't think at this point we need to do that. I think we can work the way it is, and we can fix what's wrong. I do have one question, and the mayor and I had some discussion about this. This is a great problem to have. And I got to tell you, I've interviewed for this twice this will be the second time I've been sitting on the interviews for the Housing Authority. The first time, we had one candidate. And it was a reappointment. So that was a little hard. We went ahead and did the interview, but it seemed kind of silly at the time. Now we got the other problem. We got 14. My experience, at least when hiring staff and stuff, when you have 14 applicants, you do some screening and narrow it down. Maybe you interview the top 5 or something. If this board wants us to interview all 14, I'm certainly, I think we could do that. Going through the applications, there are a few of them that would be pretty far down the list of that. I mean, I would like to have the ability, just from the standpoint of the time and effort that it takes the clerk's office and to interview 14 candidates, we're talking 2 to 3 full days probably. But if not full days, to fit everybody's schedule and get them all in and get them sit down and do the whole thing. I'd like the ability to screen them down somewhat, which goes back to the other part of when you work on the rules. Can we do that? Or are we going to interview everyone who applies? You don't want to discourage anybody from applying, but on the other hand, you can't spend weeks. I mean, what if we had 50 applicants? You know, and we could for some position. It'd be a good problem to have. But anyway, those are my comments on this. I think we can address some of these issues. I think we can, it was kind of a shot across the bow, I think, to the Housing Authority that we've got issues we're concerned about. Certainly, Trustee Eigel has some very valid concerns and have heard some things that need to be addressed. I'm just not sure changing the whole structure of the board at this point is the best way to address it moving forward. I'd like to move ahead with this, let us interview, screen them down, interview the people, make the appointments. And did I give you enough time?
That was more than enough time, Trustee Lancaster. What the statute says is for appointed members, the term of office is the number of years as set by the town board by resolution or ordinance as we've done, not to exceed 5 years in length. So our ordinance says 5 years. We could make it shorter, but not longer.
Do we have to make an ordinance change to make it shorter? Or can we just do that?
It's set by, exactly, it's set by ordinance, so we would have an ordinance to change the prior ordinance.
All right. Well, what I was wondering is if we could appoint people to shorter terms so we work this out, but it has to be a 5-year term.
As currently set in ordinance, it has to be a 5-year term. There's also something about staggering the terms, so if we shortened the terms, we would have to figure out how to stagger them properly.
Right. Well, and I think that's what happened with the Board of Health and why we have 4-year terms and they have 5-year terms, so we don't coincide with political wins that happen as an elected body.
I hearken back, like what you're saying, throwing out the baby in the bathwater. With Visit Estes Park, we had a little bit of a crisis last year, and at one point we were looking at dissolution of the board, and instead, working through the process, I think it really did come to a much better place with the smaller board, with the Marketing Advisory Committee, and I think it really improved the functionality from my view. And so, yeah, same kind of thing. I think it can be addressed organically. I do think that there need to be good dialogue between this board and the Housing Authority Board, and work out whatever the issues are. As far as screening the candidates, well, if you screen and interview 5 and you don't find 3 good candidates, keep going deeper into the pool, or even potentially open it back up again for more candidates if you simply do not have the 3 that satisfy. So all that being said, I think we've had a kind of a consensus.
Well, just one comment. It seems to me the question whether you're screened or not is up to you two. I don't think that's a board decision.
Yeah, because we have the final say as the
right,
board
we have the
anyway.
final say as the board.
Yeah. Okay, well, at this point, it seems to me that we've got a consensus to move forward with the process as it exists now.
And is the board comfortable as liaison for me working with them and some of these governance issues
Yeah.
and starting addressing some of that stuff as well?
Yes, and bring, whatever combinations we need to bring. And if they need to be publicly posted because there's more than two, well, hey, do it,
Okay, thank you.
You okay? We can move on to that last topic that we added at the beginning of this session a couple days ago. No, a few hours ago, I mean. And this is the continuation of that topic about the, what's the name of it? Downtown.
Downtown plan implementation.
Yeah, and there were at least a
and
couple
funding
trustees who did not comment on that.
Mayor, yeah, it's 10:23 at night. I do want to refocus on the purpose of what staff was asking during the study session. Your strategic plan objective for 2026 is to evaluate implementation options with the downtown business community and
Right.
chamber. So far what I've heard, and I have not heard from Trustee Lancaster or Trustee Eshelman yet, is a general go talk to the downtown business community about the downtown plan, talk to them about the supportive and passive options. Do not lead with funding. In fact, I have heard no interest in anything other than maybe DDA or BID down the road if there is a necessary use for those funds, and approaching the downtown business community to engage with them about the broader downtown plan and being able to bring that information back to you all towards the end of this year, likely in December, to discuss what we've heard, the chamber and the town staff have heard, in engaging with the downtown business community about these options overall and about the downtown plan overall.
Can I just throw in some support for that approach? I think that's going to be a lot more effective to not have a little conversation about the plan and a bit of conversation about how we fund this, because it really felt earlier when you talked about that, we want to create funding to do something, but we're not sure what it's going to be. So my recommendation in communicating with business owners would be, what do you think about the plan? And we can talk about funding another time. I think there are some reasonable avenues if there are some projects that are worthy and voted on by the people they affect.
I agree. My comments were, it depends on the projects and what we do, and we really need to sit down again and kind of refresh it and see if those are still viable. There may be things that aren't in there that downtown people want to address now. Things have changed downtown. There may be something we need to address. And the funding should follow that. I think the funding discussion would be there. I do want to make sure people understood, though, that wasn't in the original discussion. We asked you to bring the funding options.
That's true.
So you did what we told you to do. So I'm not critical of that at all. And I'm glad you brought them up, and all those IDs and things. It does get confusing. I understand that
They're very
completely.
confusing.
I've been through that. So I'm glad you did that. It was a good briefing. It'll be good briefing for in fact, at some point I did a similar briefing for the chamber at one point. So I think that's good. The funding should follow the function, and we need to basically, what I is give the public review and comment and refresh and see what's there and get feedback and get some recommendations, and then come back, and then we'll talk about funding, depending on what we want to do, and get the funding to match what we want to do.
Cool.
Since it
What
is
else? Trustee Ashman.
10:27, I will agree with exactly what Trustee Eigel and Lancaster said. I think that is a great approach to look at it. Simple as that.
Excellent. Well, we will work with Chamber of Commerce staff and plan on coming back to you later this year with information from your downtown business community. Thank you.
Right then, any other comments? I see none. This town board meeting of Estes Park is adjourned at 10:26 p.m. on the same day we started.